said reflect the will of the town meeting and entertain a potential use of the schools, or is it a strict application of the law?
Well, there was I think that was this what came out of your economic forum back in 2010 or 11, where there were 3 sets of parcels that were brought to town meeting for conveyance.
Correct.
I'm just saying, let's fulfill the town meeting is saying. I think there's some confusion perhaps on part of the school committee as to whose custody that land is in. They're acting as if they're still in control.
And I hear you saying 2 things. One is the control issue, but the second is the economic development purpose.
Well, I think we need to move forward on that at some point when that's appropriate. It's going to be 3 years.
That answers my question. Any other questions from the board?
I would say though, when I read through those minutes, I think it said economic development or however
Yes.
so best the selectmen deem
Right.
to use the land.
That's true.
So I think we should just say that it needs to be very clear, right, in the letter that the property is not the property of the school committee,
Mm-hmm.
and that it is the property of the board of selectmen.
And the disposition of the property.
Disposition of the property is up to the board.
Yeah.
Right. So whether we use that,
You offering?
whether we run out and try and get a developer or whatever,
Right.
it
Yeah.
could be that might be the best use of that land, but,
Okay.
I think
reasonable.
that doesn't cut things off.
That directs the
Yeah,
language you always follow.
I would say the same thing. I wouldn't want to just cut it off blank
Yep.
like that.
Okay. I'll accept that as a friendly amendment. If the seconder will also.
But if Marcy's describing it as the original intent of the motion, which is what you intend, right? That the alternative purpose.
Well, I'll accept the or, but my preference when we talk about the
Correct.
fate of
I
that land
understand.
would be economic development.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of a motion of a note to school committee written along the lines that Dana has described? Against? Abstain? 4-0-0.
And Paul, that's essentially the language was in the email.
With regard to the proposed geotechnical survey, what if any, what,
That can go forward. It's the town's data.
at the end of the day, it provides insight into the buildability of the parcel, irrespective of how it's ultimately used. Okay. Anything else, Dan? That's a pretty heavy liaison report. Marcy?
Yeah, I actually have a few, if I can find them again. Starting to get a little meeting fatigue.
I
perhaps.
saw it the other night. You looked like you were ready to collapse.
I think that's because I was actually on the verge of getting sick at that particular meeting. I had.
One of the benefits of working hard.
So the first one was the library building committee meeting, and I actually got off a plane and went almost directly to that meeting, and then was sick all weekend. So that was what you were seeing probably. But the library building committee, we did have a meeting with the trustees who were there also, and Bob's going to discuss that further in our session. I think we've got a good approach going forward, and it should put us in good shape to make sure that the library project stays on track. So that's good news. That was May 29th. June 3rd, we had a town audit, and we're going to be reporting on that later on, but they did report that, it was really a very good audit. They were actually done extremely early. There were just scheduling issues and maternity leave and different things that delayed the approval on it. So that was good. The one thing that was identified, we've already talked about, so we'll get that. On June 4th, I actually attended the gubernatorial forum of Moving Massachusetts Forward. That was about transportation and smart growth, and I was kind of interested to hear if there were new or different perspectives that were put forward. There were about 5 candidates there. They really were all very like-minded, so I wouldn't say there was a ton of differentiation, but it was actually interesting to hear, what they had to say and some thoughts around transportation and smart growth and how you use that to help other economic development. So, June 9th, is that just yesterday?
It's like a year ago, doesn't it?
That seemed like a year ago, actually. So we had a joint meeting with the Zoning Advisory Committee, the CPDC, and the Zoning Board of Appeals to review, to gather input on parking signs and non-conforming, which are the 3 different topics that will be discussed at the next public forum, which is happening on June 18th. Encourage people to come and participate in that session and provide their feedback. interesting note also, they had a MAPSI open house where they talked about those complete streets and the bike and pedestrian program and presented that to CPDC. And they did vote to advise the Board of Selectmen to adopt a pedestrian and bike plan, kind of using that information as a basis. So that seemed, I think that was in line with what we talked about anyway. So that was all good. Tomorrow night we have zoning advisory committee meeting, which is planning for the public forum, but we welcome anyone who is interested to come to those public, our meetings are always public, so whether it's a public forum or a public meeting, people are welcome to come. I think there's also a library building committee meeting tomorrow, so I will be at that for a half an hour before I go to the zoning advisory committee meeting. The last thing I have is actually a question. So I noticed in our packet tonight there's a letter from the town of Pepperell. Do we normally address these in the meeting? Because I came across a letter we had from Dartmouth that was similar a couple of months ago, and I don't recall us actually discussing that one. And it seems like if we get these letters, we should actually have a little bit of discussion on them as a Board of Selectmen. So the Dartmouth letter was about small businesses and adjusting that tax credit so that more people would take advantage of it. I don't think we actually did anything with this.
No, I don't think so. The Pepperell one did cry out for your attention.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about the Pepperell one later on
Only
tonight.
briefly.
Okay.
We may as well do it now.
Okay.
North Reading had a public hearing last Thursday. I have not heard how that went other than contentious.
Mhm.
Just for some background, there's some discussion about a revised revised natural gas line to go in. And the first time I saw a plan last summer, it was north of North Reading, or perhaps the northern section of North Reading.
Yeah.
So it really didn't affect Reading. They kept sending updates, still hadn't really changed. But then one update sometime in the spring or late winter was, well, now we're going to head in the southern part of North Reading and possibly even hit Reading. So that was a change, a pretty significant change for Reading.
So have we actually talked to RMLD? Because this would actually be, I believe, advantageous from an RMLD perspective.
Yep.
Because we actually want that additional supply of public gas. So
Yep.
I would recommend that we, before we do any voting on this, that we actually get some input from Colleen and get some
she can come to one of your
direction.
meetings. I forget if there's a time frame, because I talked to him yesterday.
They wanted to form their coalition by July 1st, so maybe she can come to the meeting on the 24th.
I meet with her every few weeks, and I hadn't had that when I last saw her, but I'll bring it to her attention.
But
Sure.
that makes the most sense to me, because it's
Yeah.
as with everything else we get, right? Nothing's as simple as it appears. It seems very simple when you look at it from one single lens, but then when you start to look at the bigger picture, there's a lot more variables in it. And
Yep.
it's a lot.
Tonight's letter asks us to entertain a position, not merely a vote.
Yes, it absolutely does. Well, and I believe the other one actually asked us to entertain a position as well. So I would recommend that we also maybe resurrect that Dartmouth one and take a look at it and see if that's
I agree.
something that we should support.
You know, the nature of these things is it's a nice letter, a page and a half, it reads well, and you dig into the details, and often there's a lot of meat beneath the words that you come to a very different conclusion.
Absolutely. That's why I said it's never as easy as it sounds, right?
Okay.
So, page and a half, you can pretty much put your case forth for almost anything
Right.
on a given
Right.
subject.
Anything else?
That, I believe, is it for me.
Another robust liaison. Yeah, we have a high bar.
We're going from the high bar to the zero bar. There's like no liaison report.
Part of the vast, take credit.
Oh yeah, well, you already
I've
took
had
credit
many
for
of
that.
those, just so you know.
Yeah.
In the past, I've had many of those, so.
My trusty sidekick and I. But
For myself, Dan and I represented Board of Selectmen at the June 2nd School Committee meeting, where the formation of a subsequent building, what is this?
Was it space?
space needs.
Space needs was the term used.
I changed the wording.
And also presented at that meeting was a formulation of the group, which, if memory serves, is 2 additional persons greater than the original working group. My interest was primarily at that meeting to determine whether the results of the initial 3-year effort led to a change in tactic for what was being proposed for the working group. I asked the question, have you done a gap analysis? Have you analyzed the reasons that were put forth by the community for the responses given? And have you entered that into your proposal for the working group? And the response given back primarily was, yes, we've done a gap analysis. It was done on the first evening. And we've concluded that we didn't communicate well enough. And I found the answer curious because 3 years provides an ample opportunity to communicate. And what we heard, at least what I heard on the evening of town meeting, didn't lend itself to a communication problem. It was a bunch of other operational gaps that hadn't been dealt with. So I'm very anxious and interested in making sure that the second working group gets a good footing, but also learns from the oversights and omissions of the first working group and doesn't seek to repeat them. So there'll be 2 Board of Selectmen members on that committee, and I'm sure we'll be well represented.
I would say, I would start back even further. So I always seem to do in this particular issue and really start, not just with the gaps that were expressed in that meeting, but maybe really clearly identifying what are the specific issues, what is each
Absolutely.
big business issue that's trying to be
Absolutely.
resolved, and what's the priority on those.
Voice of the customer.
And
Yes.
that way, you can very easily see which of those levers are playing into
Absolutely.
the overall picture, as opposed to just saying, we need a building, and these are all the reasons we need a building.
There are 30
So-
choices in this one.
So, I think, you know, you can do a very robust, selection process, but if you're not selecting on the right criteria, it's not gonna actually help.
So that process will get kicked off, I'm sure, in the near term, and as I said, Board of Selectmen will represent it. Let's see, if there are no other questions, are there any questions from the public? No? Bob, you want to take us through your report?
I'll just hit a couple things. I think you'll hit some of them later tonight. I do want to talk a little about the library process. There will be a library building committee meeting tomorrow night. They were at CPDC a few weeks ago, and there's a lot of concerns with the site. Not so much the building. The building's good, but there was some concerns primarily from the police chief and in the absence of the fire chief on his behalf. Public safety issues, egress and ingress into the site, and access for ambulances and so forth. We had a meeting today. Significant amount of staff was there. The architects, the owner, project manager, Ruth Murrell's on vacation. She was in there. Very good resolution, very common sense, simple. Not often an architect was up with an easy, simple answer. In this case, they did. It's something we had all discussed last winter. And instead of having, for those of you that went that night, I know many of you did, instead of having the entrance and the exit on the same side, the entrance is going to stay as it is now. The exit is going to come back along that same side of the building and wrap around in front of the building and use the current exit. Not anything complicated, no rocket science.
Around the extension?
No,
No.
front
You
of
can
the
go right
building.
around the front of the building.
So you're going to have a 2-way just next to the building
I see.
for a brief moment. And then you're going to exit in front of the building.
I see.
Where there's now a hill. The beauty of that is, from many standpoints, it's much safer. It's not changing the curb cut at all, so if neighbors aren't happy, that means they don't like it now. We're not changing anything. We don't need a traffic study since we're not changing anything. The project will go forward on the same time frame. And another advantage is we picked up 6 or 7 parking spaces. Wow. So along the side. So we even started discussing and envisioning, I don't want to get ahead of the library building committee, but having a drop off in front. So you wouldn't have to go all the way to the back if you're just picking up a kid or dropping off a kid. So I think it was a real simple, very low cost, almost no cost solution, which it's just unfortunate we hadn't got there months ago. But we're in the right place. So later tonight, I'll ask you to have a motion to reform the building committee slightly as the trustees requested a week or so ago.
Great.
I think I'll skip anything else. I wrote you a couple notes, just because we have town council. And it's going to be short.
Okay. We have a certificate of recognition for Ms. Josephine
Josephine Milano.
Milano. And having snatched
Yes.
the certificate of recognition. from
Here,
the
I'm
committee.
gonna hand it right back to you.
Thank
There you go.
Recognizing the celebration of her 100th birthday. It's certainly a milestone, and as I grow older, I recognize the wisdom that comes with age. So we're here to celebrate Josephine's achievement and wish her many more birthdays.
I'd like to move the Board of Selectmen approve the certificate of recognition for Josephine Milano.
Second that?
All those in favor? 4-0. And thank you. Paula, how will we get this to?
I'll give this to me after it's a chamber.
All right, thank you. I'm not passing it down.
You want to deal with this? There's a motion for treasurer notes.
Yeah, let me just give you a sentence on that. The treasurer sold $1 million of bond anticipation notes. The important thing is here, we can borrow from ourselves with the authority of the selectmen. We can't do it over June 30th. So you've given us permission to borrow from ourselves during the year. We've now gone and borrowed $1 million, just specifically for the West Street project, in case we need it. Right now, the way the project lines up, the state has got a deadline that is probably not necessary, but if it was, we had to. So this gives us the funds. For the library, we're paying out substantially more than for West Street right now, but we're using the first $2 million from the state that's coming as grant money. So we will be going out to borrow permanently, probably in late August or early September for all these projects.
What are bond anticipations? I assume they have very short.
Yeah, this one matures, I believe, in September. Yeah, September 26th, that's a real short.
And I assume they're very.
0.4% interest.
Do you have a motion?
I move that all action taken by the town treasurer in advertising for public sale of a $1 million bond anticipation notes, the note of the town authorized pursuant to Chapter 77, Section 7 of the Mass General Laws as amended and supplemented and by votes of the town duly adopted, be and hereby is ratified, approved, and adopted, that the note shall be dated as of June 19, 2014, shall mature on September 26, 2014, shall bear interest due at maturity and shall not be subject to redemption prior to its stated maturity. If the note shall bear interest and is hereby sold and awarded as follows: purchaser Century Bank, amount, what's the INT, love?
0.4%. Oh, that's just amount.
No, amount is $1 million, rate is 0.4%, premium is $0. That the town treasurer is authorized to deliver the note to purchaser and the Board of Selectmen, the treasurer and the town clerk be and hereby are authorized to take action to execute and deliver all documents related to the sale.
Okay. Do I have a second? Second. Seconds. Any discussion?
The one thing I thought Dan said chapter 77, section 7?
Did I?
Instead of chapter
Oh,
40.
chapter-
Well, I'll amend that to 44.
Okay.
Too many sevens, sorry.
Who knows what you might have missed out.
That's probably what it does, right.
You're now on Stoneham. Any other discussion?
I should just point out, since we don't like to brag, as the process of putting together our bond prospectus, we're upgraded to AAA. It's a very unusual thing in Massachusetts. It's especially unusual for a town of our shape and size with such a low commercial base. So it's a real credit to anyone who's involved in the financial aspect of town government. That includes the boards and committees, the FinCom, the staff. They've done a nice job not spending more than we have. It's as simple as that.
With that in mind, Bob, it strikes me that that transition might, a year from now, might benefit from an explanation as to how it was achieved, what the thresholds were, only because when we talk about things like free cash and talk about things like spending, the inevitable question is, what does this do to our bond rating or our rating seen by agencies? Having that justification in hand would be really useful.
Well, this will be perfect timing for borrowing, $18 million for the library and West Street, or a little
What
less.
I would say is,
if we can, when we do this borrowing, now that we've changed, say, if we were double A, this is the rate that
That's the
was
way
out
to
in
do
the
it.
market,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
this
way
is
to do
what,
it.
so,
Show the
there's
savings.
actually a real tangible dollar amount that's associated.
We've had that discussion with FinCom, but now we can have it a little more tangible.
That's the cost of it. I'm trying to figure out what level did you have to achieve to
But
get it?
I understand that.
Yes.
I'm thinking ahead to the,
And so
why
what's
you
it
want
worth?
to
Yeah.
continue to maintain
Right,
it.
we
So
agree.
it's that, it's the discussion that we had in the strategic message about, we're not very good about advertising what we've done well.
You got it.
And,
Right.
and this is part of that measuring
Absolutely.
to that Jean and I.
How many other communities of the 358?
About 2 dozen, maybe a dozen to 2 dozen, somewhere in between.
Wow.
I honestly, I never thought we'd be there. I just didn't think we had the right infrastructure, no matter if we acted perfectly. Part of it is the rating agencies are a little easier on municipalities now because the default history through the recession was so good, it didn't happen. And then part of it is we've just done a really particularly good job of not spending money and saving money, and had sustainable budgets up until this year.
So that's kind of a top 5% award.
Oh, yeah.
And
That's
we're,
nice.
And we're
Yeah.
moving up. We're not.
That's great.
Okay.
I don't think we've
You
taken a
didn't
vote
vote.
on that.
That's
yet.
right. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? 4-0.
Did you vote?
No, it was second.
It was second.
Okay,
Yeah.
Marcy seconded. Mr. Halsey still hasn't joined.
Can you text me?
Yeah,
Just check.
tell me he can't,
Can't dial in.
Dial in right
I'm
now.
familiar with that. Oh, right now, okay.
yes.
Oh, that's a different system.
That's a different system. That's
A
not
mistake.
on this
Phone
end,
system
that's a
apart,
different
that's
end.
Okay, we next have an appointment to the North Suburban Planning Council.
Okay, yeah, we interviewed one candidate, Alyssa Scaparati. She's an attorney, she's a private investment funds training and development manager. She has a fair amount of community involvement experience involving Mass Department of Children and Families, Greater Boston Legal Services, domestic violence. She's very interested in getting involved in more of a planning role. In fact, she's interested in one other appointed board. We'll probably bring her name back with that next time. So,
How long has she been in that?
yes, that. So it's probably on her application. No, 4 years. Yep. She's an attorney.
It's so rewarding to see people finding time in their busy schedule
Oh, yeah.
careers
Mhm.
to.
Especially today. The pool of volunteers, in my experience, has diminished over the years.
Maybe we're doing something right. Maybe you're a AAA rating.
So I would like to move the Board of Selectmen confirm the recommendation of the Volunteer Appointment Subcommittee and appoint Alyssa Scaparati to a position on the North Suburban Planning Council with a term expiring June 30, 2016.
I'll second that.
Marcy seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor? 4-0.
Thank you very much for taking this out of work.
Okay. Next we have 5A, our town accountant.
Thought I'd start off with the information I provided in your packet regarding the P card issue. We started the P card a couple years ago, and it was pretty much done mostly by the school initially, because they were the ones who needed the card the most for school activity, travel, and things of that nature. And we had problems on the school end, and we rolled out the town cards, which are just a few: finance, RMLD, and the library card. Just prior to me going on maternity leave, the library had contacted me. They hadn't picked up their card yet. Normally I sit down with them and go over what the rules are for the card. They had a purchase that they wanted to make, and it was something that was on sale. It was kind of like one of those urgent things. And the rules of the P card are really that we use it for things that we can't use a bill for, and that a lot of times an employee will put it on their credit card and be reimbursed to avoid that kind of situation. So there was a rush to get the card, and I happened to have a doctor's appointment that day. So she came by and picked up the card, but didn't actually sit down with me like everybody else did to talk about what the rules are for use of the P card. I forgot to leave the user guide with the treasurer, and so the very next day I sent her the user guide, the policies that she would know. And then she sent me back a signed future guide page that, acknowledging responsibility for the card. She didn't end up using it for the purpose she wanted, and that was several months ago, I wanna say 8 months ago she went to the card, and then they haven't used it since. I think it was May 27th I came in and she had given me a copy of receipt for first purchase on the P card, and it was for airfare. And the policy the Board of Selectmen had approved specifically said no travel, because we had problems at RMLD with some abuse with the credit card, and that was in an area they felt they really wanted to expand this card for. It was allowed for student activity travel, but not for travel for our employees. I immediately reached out to Ruth and told her, hey, this isn't what the card was meant for. The Board of Selectmen made it very clear they didn't want this type of activity on the card. But where the expense would have been something she could be reimbursed for, I left it on the card. I just asked her to return the card to me so that I could discuss it with the board and see if we wanted her to, or the library to maintain their privilege. It does appear to me just to be an oversight. I don't know if she didn't read the guide or it's been so many months since she read the guide that she didn't recall that this was a prohibited use. She definitely was apologetic. She did, I think I enclosed in your packet her response when I asked her, could you share with me how this ever happened? Did she not read? I didn't know what it was. It seems that she didn't refer back to the guide after the fact in so many months. When she read it, she just totally forgot. And so I enclosed all of that information so that you could make the call to see if we should reissue the card back to them. I just wanted to throw that out to you guys and see what you had to say about it.
Question, did you actually sit down with her after this happened, did you sit down with her and review the whole guide like you would normally?
We emailed back and forth, but I didn't actually sit down with her. Maybe it makes sense when she comes, if the card is reissued to the library, that we sit down and go through it very clearly, make sure that there isn't any misunderstanding about what it should be used for.
Now, how long ago did we start using P-cards? When were they issued?
I would say a year and a half.
Year and a half.
I think it was 1 year ago last fall.
Okay.
This is the second year, so you renewed it, I think, back in, I want to say October, yeah.
So, okay. So a year and a half, it hasn't been needed at the library.
Yeah.
That would be my question, is it really needed? You know what I mean? If it's been a year and a half and then the only time it's been used,
Yeah.
it doesn't sound like there's a huge need, but there may be one coming up, I don't know.
Yeah, I can address some of that. I can't exactly know how the library might use it, but I'll say one of the most common uses that both they and we have is things you need to buy only online. There's no other recourse. So renewing our website domain, there is no way to do it other than to use a card like this or your personal credit card. There is no purchase order, there is no mailing address, there is no phone number to call someone. That's either you use a credit card or you don't get it. So in addition to can't buy it any other way, the schools originally came at it partly for that reason and partly because you get a much better price in certain instances you buy online. So I'm sure the library probably first came to you for some kind of a technology-related purchase online. So for that reason, I'd ask you to restore it to them. I think it was an honest error. They may not use it again for a year, but if the opportunity comes up in the short run and they can take advantage.
Incidentally, though, she did do a
Well,
There could actually
yeah.
be unusual purchases that come up that
Yeah.
have to do with,
That's true.
them moving around and.
Yeah, I think it's possible, yeah.
And we would want to, if you do sit down with Ruth, we'll talk a lot about the security of the card because they're going to go to a much less secure space, a temporary space that's just a little less controlled.
And she only put the airfare on it, but we usually will allow the conference itself to be put on. So she chose, if she had the two things that she had to pay, and she chose to put the airfare. She didn't realize, but the conference would have been okay on the card. It's the travel, the meals, anything that she would have done while she was away. Those are the things we're trying to avoid. I feel like it's just an honest mistake. That's my feeling on it. You might have a different take, but that's my feeling.
Sharon, I was reading this on Sunday driving back from New Hampshire, and it took me about 30 miles to figure out that there was the purchasing card and the German card for the same card.
I acknowledged after I got the email that, we call it a procurement card, we call it a purchasing card, it's the same thing. I can change all the backup to say
That's fine.
purchasing card.
But it was right at the moment where you were introducing the topic, and I said, oh, this must be the problem.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's our problem. I know that there's actually two issues of compliance. One is the use,
Mhm.
the purchase, the item that was purchased. And then secondarily, the submittal requires the recording of an invoice and an account. And because there's two issues of compliance, I think Marcy's comment of sitting down to reinforce,
Yeah,
again, is
definitely
a
makes sense.
wise.
Where she has to pick the card up
Right.
again, I mean, normally, that normal process now will take place where I'd sit down.
Well, and it
like,
sounds like
well,
it just didn't happen, so.
It didn't
it's-
happen, and so I felt kind of responsible when she made the mistake, because you figure, well, if I sat with her and she remembered having a conversation with me and I, said, hey, keep in mind this travel, maybe that would have stayed with her longer than reading some guide I gave her. So I kind of felt somewhat responsible for the error. And, hopefully it won't happen again, but if she is given the privilege back, I certainly will sit down with her and go over everything in the guide and make sure that we're understanding each other, because the not leaving the Oregon object on the invoice is kind of a small thing, as long as we have the receipt, but it's one of those things that helps us to put it in the right spot. And
Right.
so it just shows that none of the steps of what was in the guide really registered with her.
Correct.
And so that's why I definitely think it's necessary to sit down.
Yeah.
I mean, where she did sign off on the guide, I just assumed that she read it, and maybe she did,
And she maybe did,
and
it's just.
8 months passed, and you don't refer back to it, and that's probably how it was, so.
I don't know if we need a vote. Is there anyone?
I have a question. Are there any other such instances of violations of P cards on
This is
record?
the first one I've noted in
First one?
a year and a half. that-
Yeah, I mean, the language here is pretty strong, and I'm having a hard time understanding how this was overlooked. Failure to adhere to purchasing card policy and guidelines will result in revocation of card use, which has happened, and the user may be subject to disciplinary action. An individual who is found to abuse the use of a purchasing card will be subject to disciplinary action up to and including termination from employment, along with potentially criminal charges being filed against them. I'm not suggesting any of that happened, I'm saying that this was pretty plain language that obviously was not read or understood.
Yeah.
And I hope that will be emphasized with this individual. And I'm not gonna ask something be put in the personnel record, but if this ever happens again with anyone,
Well,
we need to do that.
one thing I will say is that Sharon brought this up when we were with the auditor, and I believe probably next year they'll do a check on this, so.
Okay, thank you.
Because we're talking about areas of emphasis and P card came up.
I would also ask that we notice the library board of trustees, just for formality.
Yes.
I did get an
Sure.
email, that I got from Bob where he was, the chairman of the library trustees was CC'd on this issue. So I'm pretty sure they are aware, but there was no response that came back to me. Did you get a response from?
No, the night that we were over there at the building committee meeting, the trustees stayed in session and they had this discussion.
Okay.
So they're quite
So
aware of it.
so it may be in the minutes then.
I'm referring more to the remedy
What you
that we're
do
proposing.
tonight, yeah.
Every-
Oh, okay.
Sit down.
Yeah, that's certainly the policy.
Okay.
So the trustees are definitely aware of this. and That's all I have.
I have no objection to reinstating.
Nora,
Yeah, the legal matter.
No, I don't think so. No harm, but.
So I figured, well, since this is my quarterly, I would go over anything else that you might need to know. One of the things since I came back on maternity leave that I've been keeping my eye on is the ambulance receipts, because we switched to a third-party biller, and it seemed like when I got back, it seemed like ambulance receipts were behind my expectations, not by a lot, but a little bit behind. So I've been asking the question, what's going on here? What am I missing? Something's not quite right here. It's not where it usually is at this time during the year. Greg and others informed me that when we switched to the third party, that there was some transition paperwork that needed to be done with Medicaid to make sure that we could collect those ambulance payments through the third party. And so I keep asking the question, but recently I asked Greg, and I got an email this past Thursday that said that that process has been completed and we should be getting our Medicaid payments by the end of June. So at this point, I think this week we were behind by like $170,000 to budget, and they owe us like $350, and we're gonna get that by the end of June. So we're probably gonna come in above $100,000 above budget, but right now I've been watching it because it's been behind. Now we have other receipts that are ahead of budget by quite a bit, so that this wasn't gonna cause a revenue deficit. But it was still something I had my eye on because it was, odd to see that we were behind. The ambulance seems to come in pretty regular. So So I do think the resolve is coming because we have gotten confirmation from our third party that they've gotten that information taken care of with Medicaid, that they've been approved and we should be getting our payments. So that's just something I wanted to.
One question on that, Sharon, is the only gap there the Medicaid?
I think it was Medicaid.
Mass Health.
Oh, and Medicare, I'm sorry, Medicare.
Oh, Medicare.
That's the
Medicare.
only deficit with the third-party billing, there's no other operational defect or?
No, so far I've not noticed anything that seems to be problematic.
Good.
That was the one thing that stood out, I was like, what isn't coming in for receipts? Something big is missing, and that was it. So we should be doing good going forward. I mean, that was just a transitional piece that was, taking some time to
Do
transition.
you think our last estimate at completion, I think maybe 100 million to the positive budget?
That's what, based on what they're saying they owe us, that's what it looks like.
And that's a number that was adjusted up, reflective of.
So you raised the rates,
Right.
I think it was March first, it might have been April first. So there should have been a little bump for that, but it was already running ahead, I guess.
I think we always have a little extra in that time anyway. It's hard to know what that is going to be, but I think we always have a little extra. So I just figured I'd mention that. We did have our audit committee meeting this past week. As Marcy noted, it kind of got getting pushed out because of my maternity leave, but also because we had some scheduling conflicts. We had it planned for an evening and then we didn't have a quorum and, just a lot of delays. It went very, very well. The audit was, very successful. They got in, they got their work done quickly. It just, the delay was more on our end. They did point out some things to keep in mind when you're looking at the financial statements in the upcoming years, fiscal 15. Depending on liability will show on the face of our balance sheet. Our balance sheet will look really awful, but maybe compared to our peers, it won't look as bad as some of our peers. Yeah, they said less ugly than our peers is the way I think they described it. And in fiscal 18, the full OPEB liability will show as
So
well,
they've been
so
talking
it will
about
get
this
even
before.
uglier.
So it moves from the bottom of the page in small print to
It's
from
in
the
a
liability
foot-
account.
It's in a footnote in the-
Note now
yeah.
at the back, and it's moving it so that it now
And the bond
has
rating
decimal.
agencies are fully aware of the numbers, they know what's in the footnotes, they know what it is. It's not like we're, anybody's missing it that's important, I think it's just kind of just to make it in our face that we know what that liability is, that when people are reading the financial statements, it's very clear what that liability is.
That raises a question. This past year, the OPEB liability diminished after a review of either our performance or performance to peers. How will that change? In other words, a change in the environment as it benefits or hurts us. So normally a liability you can point to and say, I owe
They have
this.
an actuarial study that reduced.
We had a valuation that went down, is it?
Evaluation.
So if that continues to happen, how do we show the change of actuarial behavior rather than anything we might do on our part?
The number would change on the balance sheet, is that what you mean?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out if a number change can be rapidly interpreted as an actuarial background
No,
change
you-
or something
no,
we're doing
you would-
right or wrong.
Yeah.
That's a hard thing to
That's a
analyze.
hard thing, yeah.
Because we looked at the gap from what it used to be and what it is. And we sort of figured, well, some of that is really just purely actuarial in that they're going to use a different discount rate than before.
Right.
Partly because your behavior changed, but it's really, to me, just semantics.
The whole actuarial methodology is a big black box. They
Yeah.
put numbers in,
Right.
something comes
Doesn't
out
make
on the
any
other
sense,
end,
it's
you don't
finance.
know that,
And
that's,
they make a
that's
lot
for
of
those actuaries
assumptions,
to
and
know,
think,
so.
they make assumptions about what your investments are gonna earn, and you earn more than what they assumed. You've got what they call a gain in that line item. They assumed, certain premiums would be going up by, X amount, and if they go up by less, you get a gain there. All those things factor into how they calculate what
We
the
had a lot of
valuation.
favorable factors last time, and the next time,
Mm.
not likely to have every one of those
Yeah, because we
favorable
really had
factors.
premiums staying very
The
level.
health insurance premiums is one thing we can feel like we had some influence over, that strong about.
But we're having premiums go up in this coming year, so I can't expect that next valuation will be as positive and going down. So that's just something to keep in mind. We did have a discussion about areas of emphasis for fiscal 14 audit. A lot of discussion around school because Mary Delai being, a very strong leader there at the school, her exit will make it so that they really think that the focus would be somewhere in the school for the areas that they take an extra strong look at, and that makes sense.
And Jean Gillespie was there from the schools, and she felt that that was a good place to
Yeah.
focus too.
And Ed Boyd has since reached out to me and is looking to come out to do preliminary work in July. Normally they come out in June, but at our audit committee meeting so late, we really had very little interaction with them. And so So, and maybe because I've, been on maternity leave, I thought it might be nicer to give me a little time before they come out. So July is when they're gonna come out and start doing some of their testing, and then, probably the normal timeframe, September, I would guess, after I've gotten the year closed. This is the start of a very busy time for me, because I'll be closing the year, and preparing the free cash certification, Schedule A, the end of year, the tax recap. So from now till like November, I'm gonna be pretty straight out. So I know they're sympathetic. They don't wanna be in my face if they don't need to be, but they'll be in there in July, and then they'll probably go away and come back in September. And the only other thing I had to share is when I was hired, I had my CPA license, which I've maintained, but the board at the time, I think Johnson, that was actually on the board at the time, had asked that I get the Certified Government Accountants certification that the MMAAA puts out, and I have since done that, so. Thank you. They are giving,
No easy feat.
Yeah, no, definitely not. And they are giving out the certificates at the June conference. I had no intentions of going. It's done. It's expensive. I don't have that kind of money. So hopefully I'll get it in the mail.
Use the peaker.
Yeah.
So I figure I'll just,
Then who's gonna go and
Who's
revoke
gonna
it
notice?
from her?
I figured I'll just put the certificate, they're gonna
auditors
mail
will
to me
find it
in my
next year.
file and be done with it. But then every 3 years, you have to go to their conference to maintain your license. A little different than the CPA license where I have to do 80 hours of CPA. They just want you to come to their conference.
Write the check.
Once every 3 years, which I have no problem. It's really, really focused on town accountants, so it really is a great place to go to get the updates of what's going on and what we should be on top of, what's changing, and that sort of thing. So I think that's all I had to present to you unless you have questions.
You make it so easy, Sharon. It's smooth, it's on point.
Oh, thank you.
It's an easy read.
Thank you.
Any questions from the board? Thank you.
Good night.
It'll be a tax write-off.
What'd you say?
It'll be a tax write-off.
Yeah, let's hope. Well, yeah. How was that?
I'll go and see housing authorities.
Yeah.
Do you wanna go ahead with B and C?
Yeah.
I don't,
Oh, the housing authority.
the health thing is nothing surprising. There's a 740.
Well, I'm sorry. Yeah, would it make more sense to
Later.
put off B and C?
Yeah.
Yeah. Skip right to D and
Which C?
Yeah, we see. Second C.
The first C or the second C?
The second C. Good old word.
I know.
Bring back word
We have 10 minutes. We want to rush through the original health agreements?
Well, these
Well,
guys were on
these
a
guys are here.
seven.
Let's,
Yeah, we need to.
Having housing
Right,
authority.
right, we can save 10 minutes, yeah. Hello.
Hi, sorry, we're having a little discussion.
That's all right. Anything?
So, right, housing authority, take us through that?
Then why don't you just quickly review in 2 minutes while you're here? I can't remember, but I don't think every member was here the last time.
Probably not. Initially, we came before you in order to suggest something of a plan to buy down some of the gazebo units when and if they came up for sale, so that they become part of the housing inventory for the town of Reading. I've been working behind the scenes on trying to get some information on how that might happen, and we did get late information today, so I think it's gonna have to be more of a discussion because of what we had found out. I'm gonna share with you an email from our attorney, Brad Latham. Between the two of us, we made some contact, and I asked him how to follow. It appears that this may not move as quickly as we had hoped. Because it looks like the town would have to do a lip application in order for this to proceed as planned. It certainly is a possibility with no issues. based on a conversation with Tony Hall at DHCD. That's not the usual gal we work with, but I think the other gal was on vacation. So as you can see, it would involve, the application, a plan approved by DHCD. So the town would have to do the application, submit it to DHCD for approval, along with a marketing plan. And once we get it back from DHCD with their approval, it goes back before the Board of Selectmen to move forward the next step. I was just voicing my, some concerns I have to my board members, is that we tentatively had a buyer for this at the original, as an original affordable property with that existing deed restriction in place. And I don't think they would mind waiting. The problem is, though, if this has to go into a lottery, there's probably a chance that they would not get the unit. I'm not sure. I don't know if that is, I don't know how my board would vote on whether that would be fair to the couple that's been already waiting 6 or 8 weeks for us.
This is a pretty significant difference
Mhm.
from what we were expecting. It's a big difference.
Absolutely. I mean, this is an area of expertise, so I didn't know what was involved in making, this development and of affordable development. However, I do think, going forward, that we should look into this, only because there are 10 units over there that are affordable. So we might be able to draft, it's not my area again, but we might be able to draft a marketing plan, so that as these come available for sale, that they can indeed be, converted. And if we can get this in place, don't forget that we also have 3 units of our own presently, and I'm sure that that could be, put into this equation, maybe even initially, so that 3 would be, originally, will go right into this plan. And I do have a potential 3-bedroom that's coming up for sale, so that could be a 4th. Even if I don't get this one here that we're doing, we don't, know how it's gonna go. I think it's a good plan to work with the Board of Selectmen to, in the future, get this whole, development converted. I think it's possible. I'm just not familiar with the LIP applications. They say it has to come from the
It
town.
will take months,
It would,
several months.
okay.
Probably.
Well,
Doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do, but it doesn't address your specific
no, kind of threw a monkey
situation.
wrench in our plan,
Which is too
and
bad.
we certainly had good intentions.
Yeah.
And again, in the future, if we could get this all set up, potentially, with what I know about that program over there, the town would still be getting an affordable unit for anywhere from, depending on if it's a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom, anywhere from, $20,000 to maybe $35,000, depending on, the current market situation. So I think potentially, it's, it's a good thing for the town, because we're not gonna be paying $150,000 or $175,000 for an affordable unit, and we can acquire them.
Okay.
So it kinda did throw a monkey wrench into it.
Yeah, we can bring the LIP request to the board. I'm not sure about June 24th, but certainly July. And it's really a question of how long the state takes, which is impossible to know.
Well, it's a little bit different in that fact that, it's not like it's a new development, it's not, that sort of thing. And I said, again, we're sorry that I just got the information late today. Actually, so it came to me late this afternoon, so I actually only had this moment to inform my board of the dilemma.
Okay. Why don't you and I and Jean probably have a meeting and talk about the next step, whenever it's convenient for you. And if you want to bring board members, that's fine.
I mean, do you think it's something that the selectmen still want to do?
I think it's probably a good idea. It's very different, so we'll need to have a discussion. But there's other possible LIP applications that we've seen in recent months, and generally all of them are positive, generally. And offhand, I would say this one would be too. But we'll really need to just discuss logistics. And then we'll have to discuss whether this can or cannot help your prior or current situation at all. I'm not sure it can. Within
Probably
any
not.
kind of time frame that's reasonable.
Probably not. We don't want to lose the state,
Yeah.
at least potentially, it would be, remain as an affordable unit. So if down the road, the couple wants to sell, we're gonna be, in the same position.
Okay.
But,
I'll have Jean reach out to you and set up a meeting where we can sit in.
Okay.
Any questions on the board? Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, well, it's nice to see you anyway.
Based on the hour, we're going to jump over a couple of items. We have this evening 3 candidates for town council who will be here for 45 minutes each. This is the result of a selection process to take a funnel of candidates down through a review process. Marcy, who is on the review process?
Myself and Dan, the chief, on your,
Superintendent Doran. Bob.
And so the 3 firms here tonight are the survivors, the finalists. So we have, and I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher the name. What's it?
Harrington.
Dunch.
Miaris.
Miaris, thank you. Attorneys Miaris and Harrington. And having read through the dossier that was presented.
Why don't you folks come on up on the front row?
This happens perhaps once a decade, so.
Yeah, or so.
Or less often, hopefully. So Bob, I'm not sure of the format tonight that we anticipated.
What I would suggest, in the interviews, we had some specific questions, the 5 of us asked questions. So we already have had that discussion, but for the board, I think it would be helpful for you folks to start off with a 5 or a 10-minute overview of the firm, and then just for the board to feel free to ask whatever questions that strike you in reaction. And if you folks have questions, by all means, ask them as well.
Okay. I think we can handle that. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
So my name is Ray Miaris. This is Tom Harrington, and our firm is called Miaris and Harrington. We are located in Belmont, Massachusetts, and we are a firm that concentrates essentially exclusively on municipal law. I first got interested in municipal law when I was an undergraduate, and one day I was walking down the hall, and there was a sign that said, there was a poster that said, which department has the hardest problem sets? And the answer was the Department of Urban Studies. And so I went there, and I'm still at it. I started our firm in 1988, and one of our first hires was a promising young law student named Tom Harrington, and he's been with us ever since.
Still showing promise.
still working it.
Some years later, we found another promising young law student, Chris Heap, who is now our 3rd partner. So I'm aware of the 3 finalists. All 3 are good law firms. The lawyers that you'll be talking to today are all fine lawyers. You can't make a bad decision. But I think, so I'd like to spend the rest of my time talking about why I think you'd be most comfortable working with us. When it comes right down to it, they're all smart people. What you're really looking for is somebody who you can work with comfortably, that you feel as though you are getting the results, the information you need, and that you're comfortable engaging in a conversation with the lawyer, and that you're developing a relationship that will move the town forward. So, why will you be more comfortable with us than with someone else? I guess I would start to answer that question by saying that in addition to being municipal lawyers, we encourage all of our members, all of our attorneys to volunteer in their local towns and to serve on municipal boards. So We have a member of zoning board of appeals in one town, a planning board, a member, a conservation commission member. I serve in something that's delightfully called the bylaw review committee in my hometown of Belmont. We recently took over as town council in Wellesley, so Tom had to, he lives in Wellesley, had to resign as a member of the rec board, but he was an elected member of the rec board in Wellesley before that. And I think that's really important for our people and for you, because we're, everyone who is working with you has had the experience of sitting on the other side and listening to legal advice and trying to formulate a response based on what legal advice they're getting. And I think it really helps to a significant extent in providing you with service, to know what it is like to receive the service. So I think that's one thing. Well, another thing that you might want to know about any firm that you hire is the person that you're designating as lead town council. In this case, that's me. How many towns are they serving as lead town council? Because that's a pretty good indication of how quick they're going to be able to get back to you. So I serve as lead town council in Hopkinton and Stockbridge, 2 towns. Obviously, Reading would be the third. That's a manageable load. It's but if you start hearing that somebody's already town council in 5 or 6 towns, then you may be wanting to know how soon they're going to be able to return your phone call. We try to make it very clear to our clients who is doing the work. You never will be talking to a lawyer that you haven't met. You will almost always be talking directly to me, but even if I'm not physically able to be present 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Sometimes you'll be talking to someone else. Tom will be our principal backup, but even if you're talking to a different lawyer in our firm, it will be somebody that you have met. We will make a point that you get to know everyone in our firm. Everyone is a good municipal lawyer, and you will feel comfortable dealing with everybody. You will never get a call back from someone you've never met. Another thing to help you feel comfortable is that you will not find any conflicts of interest in our firm. We do not represent any of your neighboring towns, so if you ever in any dispute with any of your neighboring towns, that won't cause a problem. And we will not take on any clients of any kind who have any business or are located in the town of Reading. So you will never have a conflict. You always want to avoid having situations where town council is conflicted out, because then you'll have to go out and hire a separate town council, a special counsel for that purpose. So that's something that you want to feel comfortable about. Yes, go ahead.
My name is John Arena. I have a
Yes.
quick question for you. Reading does a fair number of regionalized activities, health, real estate, assessors. Does your comment about conflict of interest apply to the towns with which we are so associated?
So for instance, Melrose is not a geographical neighbor, but
Right.
we share.
It extends to Melrose.
Maybe others, Wakefield.
That it be covered by the
Yeah.
current proposal.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
I-
have Saugus.
I did look at the list some time ago, and I didn't notice any conflicts. I'm sorry, I don't have the list at
Saugus,
at
North
my
Reading.
disposal, but none of those towns will cause a problem.
Thank you.
Okay? The most important thing in dealing with a town council is, can you find them? And will they return the phone calls? Will they get you the answer to your question in a timely way? And everybody that you talk to tonight will promise you that they can do that. And the only way you can really judge that is by talking to our clients. You've got a whole list of our clients. Take your pick, call them up, ask them, and what they will tell you is that they always get a call back promptly, and they always get a response to their questions in a timely manner. Now, response, some questions take longer than others, so we can't say everything will be answered within 24 hours, but we always make sure that we know when you need the answer so that we can respond. And then the last thing that we offer that I'm pretty sure nobody else puts in their proposal is that we offer good humor. And by that we mean two things. One is that we think we're friendly and amiable people. But beyond that, I think that we try to practice law in a way that makes everybody feel comfortable. They're dealing with somebody who understands them and who knows how to treat people in a way that makes them comfortable and it makes them confident in what they're doing. So that in a nutshell is why I think you should hire us, and I'm happy to address any questions you might have.
Any questions from the board? Mr. Harrington, how many towns do you represent?
I represent 3 as lead counsel: Wellesley, Carlisle, and Leamington.
And as secondary counsel, or as backup from the additional?
As backup counsel, so there's 2 partners, myself and Chris Heap. So I believe we both assist Ray in Hopkinton, and Chris is the backup in Stockbridge.
Thank you.
Who on your team is the school issue point person? School legal issues?
Well, that depends on whether you're talking about construction, kind of school construction.
Probably construction, not labor.
Okay, so school construction, that would be Tom.
What are the biggest challenges you see with towns undergoing a transition like ourselves, where we've had legal counsel in place, fairly well serviced, and now transitioning out? What are the biggest challenges to taking that on and continuing?
Well, we do have some experience in succeeding town council who've been in place for a long time. The biggest challenge is to make sure that the transition goes as seamlessly as possible. So we'd like to be able to have communication with the prior town council, and we'd like to have access to opinions that have been delivered in the past and whatever. Whether or not we necessarily agree 100% with those opinions, we can't say, but the biggest challenge is to try to make it go as seamlessly as possible. The biggest opportunity is to be able to look at things with a fresh eye. And sometimes you have to rely a little bit more than a fresh eye. On the fresh eye, we did have one town where the prior town council was deceased. And so the opportunity for seamless transition was really not there. It's always a little bit humbling when you start to realize that there's a whole institutional history here that we have to learn. There's a significant learning curve, but we think we're pretty good at it, and so the challenge and the opportunity are sort of 2 sides of the same coin.
If I could add to that, so we're working on this in Wellesley. We're on lead council right now, and town council is retiring. He's been there 37 years. So those are big shoes to fill, and quite a long run. I guaranteed them I'm not going to try to do that. But what we're finding is, first of all, we really need to rely on staff. You know, my understanding is that Reading has an excellent staff, and I have no doubt, and Wellesley has an excellent staff, and they become essential because you talk to town council, but he's trying to get out the door, and so if you really want to get into an issue, you need to be able to deal with staff and understand kind of what they've been advised, where they're coming from, what their needs are. We're also doing kind of a whirlwind tour, visiting every board, As Ray said, you know, you have to, you're trying to step in, but you also want to make sure that they have the fundamentals right. Do they understand the open meeting law? Do they understand ethics? Are they doing all that stuff right? If it's the planning board, have they been to their umbrella organization meetings? Have they, you know, do they go to a meeting with a copy of the subdivision control law? Do they have the zoning bylaw? I'm sure they're excellent, but you kind of have to take a step back and make sure that they have what they need to do the job. So it's kind of twofold. You need to visit them and understand where they're coming from, and at the same time, you need to have regular communication with staff so that you're not losing something.
What does that transition period look like in terms of the calendar? And it's probably hard to specify, but just curiosity, what do you find it takes to pick up and take over with the voter?
Well, I think the Wellesley situation was the most ideal because we were appointed in February, not to take over until July. So it gave us plenty of time to sort of sit at the knees of the retainer.
Yeah. We went to
and-
all the annual town meetings, you know, so we slowly got introduced. So in that one, I would say, once Al leaves, I think we're gonna be fully up to speed in another 2 months in Wellesley, but that's having February to now to kind of
Mhm.
ease into it. I'll let you answer this.
So in Hopkinton, there was essentially no legal representation going on when I got there, and a huge development coming up with a major zoning change to accommodate it, coming up for the annual town meeting in I guess I started in January and the annual town meeting in May. And basically no guidance to learn the history. So we had to kind of accelerate that learning curve a little bit. So I would say that that in that case we were, you know, able to do it in a shorter period of time. Of course, we're always learning about, no matter how long you've been there, there's always something new to be learned about what went on, you know, years ago. I just discovered this week an agreement that one of my boards of selectmen entered into in 1997, long before I had anything to do with, apparently this agreement has a particular property owner had agreed to limit their traffic to their truck traffic in and out to certain hours of the day. They came to the town saying they wanted to amend the agreement, and no one in town hall was even aware that the agreement existed. So there's always a little surprises. We'll probably always be learning a little bit about what went on in the past.
And part of that, you know, coming up to speed on the town, do you also go back and review decisions made by previous council, and whether it be a town meeting or otherwise?
Well, that depends on how systematically it's how systematically those things exist. In Wellesley, we are blessed with a collected works of the prior town council with
7 volumes.
seven volumes.
Of his opinion letters.
Numbered.
Wow.
We are going through that. I can't say that we're necessarily studying every single one, but you know, at least we're getting a sense of what he's issued. I guess these are his most important opinions over the years, and it gives us an opportunity to see what that is. I'd say in most towns there isn't the opportunity to do something quite that systematic. So it's a bit more catch as catch can, trying to learn what prior town council did with on a particular matter, sort of on a need-to-know basis.
For the first year or two in a new town, you often start the conversation with, town council issue you an opinion on this, and can I see a copy?
Yes.
Okay.
Because often, there are boards that say, we got it, this allows us to do it. So in that case, it's pretty simple. And in other cases, it sometimes floats to the surface kind of halfway into the process.
Okay.
Right.
But just on that score, the good thing is in Reading is we've really good document storage system. So quality of what the information is one thing, but we got plenty of it.
It's online, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a good thing. And if you choose us, I'm sure we'll enjoy delving into it, at least in a selective way. We don't want to spend too much time reading all opinions that are unlikely to affect what we do in the future, but it's still good to have access to the wisdom that has gone before.
We also have our greatest hits from town meeting DVD set, which we're going to make available.
Wait.
I like to have those playing in the background of the holidays.
That's right, yes.
Who wouldn't want that?
Scrolling the names of the articles.
Yeah.
up.
That's right.
Yeah. Shush, this is Article 19.
Going back to the transition, is it something that your firm tends to lean into to try to scramble up? Or is it the sort of thing where it takes a certain amount of soak time and it's going to happen on its own? I'm getting back to the 6 months. Is that
Okay.
something that you can lean into and shrink as
Well,
necessary?
as I said, in Hopkinton, it was necessary to lean into it and make it go faster because, we needed to complete a whole planning process and write a new bylaw in relatively short order, go through the hearing process and whatever. So it was necessary to make that go faster. Everything is driven by your timelines. The obvious thing is that we have to be ready when we need to be ready. So things that are on a fast track are the things that we will put on a fast track.
For instance, in Carlisle, where we took over about a year and a half ago, what we did there, over the course of about 2.5 or 3 months, we were able to get to just about every board or commission and visit with them. And we had a lot of opportunities to sit down with the selectmen, not the selectmen, yes, but even more the town administrator. So he was catching us up. So, we would come out for a meeting, he'd meet us beforehand and catch us up on stuff. And there we were pretty much in the swing, I would even say 3 months. So it's the kind of thing where I think 80% of it you can really lean into and complete, but there is going to be that 20%, whether it's a reluctant board or something that just hasn't floated to the surface, where you kind of soak in, and over the course of 4, 5, 6 months, the rest of it comes up.
Reading is one of the towns that has its own local wetland bylaw that overlays the state. Do any of the towns you represent have a similar structure, and what's your experience been in either defending or living within?
I think all of our towns have a local bylaw. And to Tom's horn, there is a leading appeals court case called Hobbs Brook that Tom represented the town of Lincoln, and was hired as special counsel for that project. And it is the leading case that stands for the proposition that local bylaws may be more stringent than the corresponding state regulation, and if they are, the ruling of the DEP on the project is not controlling over the ruling under the local bylaw. So his experience was pretty good.
Yeah, we were not lucky, but working with a good commission there, and I'll tell you why in about a minute. So it was a complicated case that this was going to be a for Lincoln, you know, I think 3 houses in Lincoln is a major development, and so this was 6 or 7, which was kind of the biggest they've ever seen. And it did have significant wetlands impacts, but what was really beneficial to us is they brought us in early, so we could assist the commission in writing the decision, and then we were able to take the decision and defend it. And I think that was the kind of the best thing that the town did, because a wetlands bylaw needs to be more stringent in certain areas to supersede DEP. But it can't just be more stringent in those areas, it actually has to have been applied more stringently on the project on those specific factors. So just because you have a bylaw that you know has a 125-foot buffer as opposed to a 100-foot buffer doesn't necessarily get you there according to the appeals court. What gets you there is taking it and applying it in such a way to say we had to expand our buffer under our bylaw to keep this resource safe. So that was the benefit of that case. Our other towns, Carlisle and Littleton both have their own wetlands bylaw, but they're the kind of wetlands bylaw where they're just doing it to collect fees. So they're going with the state act, but collecting fees. And Wellesley does have its own wetlands bylaw. And Stockbridge.
Stockbridge and Hopkinton do as well. The Stockbridge, when I first arrived in Stockbridge, had a provision in their bylaw that said that any provision of this bylaw was superseded by any corresponding provision of the state regulation, which is, in effect, why even have it? Why even have it? So we took care of that some years ago, but I think, well, probably of the towns we have, Hopkinton and Wellesley are the 2 that are the most aggressive in defending, in using their local bylaw to require more stringent conditions than what would be required in the state regs.
I also serve as special counsel in Wenham to their conservation commission. So they have a good local bylaw as well.
Tom also served on a conservation commission when he lived in Sherburne for
I did.
years.
Yeah. Well, we have a busy season coming up in Reading. We are completely overhauling our zoning bylaws, I think you're aware.
I can't wait.
Tell me more in a minute.
Come tomorrow night.
I'd be happy to. I'd be happy.
So how do you see your introductory period dovetailing with the need to rapidly jump into that process? We also have a charter committee this meeting. Look, what I think are minor changes, the jury's out on how minor and major those changes can be from a committee versus a commission.
Okay.
Maybe just talk me through a little bit of your
Well,
plan for dealing with multiple balls in the air at one time.
Okay, so first of all, in my early part of my legal career, I was the counsel to 2 legislative commissions, the Special Legislative Commission relative to the adequacy of the water supply, which is the commission that wrote the Water Management Act, and the Special Legislative Commission on low-level radioactive waste, which was dealing at the time with the problem that we were generating low-level waste and we had no place to dispose of it. So my background includes a good amount of legislative drafting. So one of the things that I was delighted to see when I was doing my research on Reading was the fact that you were going to do a zoning overhaul. We were involved in an exercise of that sort many years ago in Stockbridge, it's a wonderful opportunity to actually think about the zoning in a comprehensive way that has not been possible when you're just making serial changes from time to time. There are drafting of bylaws is not the same skill as any other kind of drafting, and it's very important that it be done in a way that will make it be easy to use once it's done, and so I look forward to working with the town officials and boards that will be implementing the zoning bylaw to make sure that the work product not only matches. I understand you've had a master planning process going on, so we gotta match that, but we also want to make sure that when we're done, we have a document that's relatively easy to use and understand, so you don't have to run to town council every other day for an interpretation of what things mean. The Charter Commission, the Charter Review, again, that's legislative drafting. Usually, towns undertake some kind of a systematic review every 10 years or so. Is that what's going on here?
Every 25 years or so, whether we need to or not.
Every 25 years, okay.
Unlike our zoning bylaw, which is
Which is
every
85
85 years, we need to go down, so.
Okay.
Charter's relatively recent.
Okay. It's a good idea to not be shy about amending your charter if you decide that you need to. Some towns have written into their charters, that they will conduct a review every 10 years or 20 years or whatever, and then they feel as though that means that they're not supposed to touch it for that period of time. If you've got issues with the way the charter has been written, by all means, let's fix them. And rather than just live with them because we're sort of waiting for these things to stockpile. And it is a good idea to have a sort of comprehensive review on a regular basis, but if you haven't really had enough experience to do a comprehensive review, that's not a reason to accept problems. By all means, we should tackle and get the charter right. At the legislature, it's commonplace. You adopt some big old statute, and then the next year you go back and you fix all the things that didn't turn out exactly the way you want. And it's just because something has a fancy name like a charter doesn't mean that you should hesitate to fix it if you've already determined that there's problems that need to be fixed. So I would encourage you to do it.
Could you comment on how you would jump into that process,
Well, I don't know too much about what you perceive to be the issues, so I can't speak substantively to that. But I assume that the people who are living every day with the charter know where the bodies are buried, and I would want to sit down with your committee that is reviewing this and try to come up with as comprehensive a list as is possible at this time, and then, as you say, make a judgment as to whether this is something that can be done with minor tweaks or whether you need something more substantive. The minor tweak, there are a number of different ways that you can amend a charter. You don't have to go through the whole charter review process, although you may want to if you're really talking about a huge overhaul. But I would start by trying to identify the universe of changes that we want to make, see what they look like when all put together, and then try to identify a process that will lead to an amendment in the most appropriate way. And by appropriate, I mean both speed, but also sort of honoring the democratic process. You don't want to just ram down changes with sort of minimal process.
And the zoning bylaw, that similar type of approach?
Well, in the zoning bylaw, my sense is that you're contemplating, you've already identified that this is a significant overhaul.
Oh, yes.
Point person over here.
Okay, so this is a significant overhaul. Whether it's so significant that we just want to start over from scratch, I can't really make that judgment as we sit here today, but,
Well, you're
there's a
pretty-
certain amount, in zoning especially, there is some value to continuity because of, everything that you change, you're creating, grandfathered uses and grandfathered provisions and whatever, so to the extent that, that what's there, if it's hopeless, it's hopeless, but to the extent that what's there can be preserved so that you're not constantly, remember, all those non-conforming structures and uses that you end up creating, then every time that somebody wants to make a change to those things, there's another process that has to be gone through to allow those. Ideally, you don't want to create so much process at the end.
Our goals are to simplify, streamline, and modernize.
Well, those are all very good goals.
Without changing and getting rid of all the guardrails and.
You're pretty far along in that process.
We are pretty far along in the process, yeah.
And
But
has a-
we are definitely going to be in need of services to help from the town council perspective.
Has a lawyer, a zoning lawyer read it yet?
No, I don't think so.
We do have an
You have
attorney
attorneys on your board.
on board.
Yeah, we've not looked at it from the town's perspective.
Okay, so that would be the first step.
We're about a year into it, not quite, with another 6 months to go.
Okay. But,
We have the original typewritten copy from 1928.
Oh, good.
If you cared to refer back to that, but there's been many amendments since then.
okay, that's good. Well, getting the zoning bylaw right, it requires a specialized expertise, and we'll be happy to take that on. In fact, to me, that's the number one most attractive thing about the prospect of becoming town council, is getting the opportunity to work on the zoning bylaw. It's a real joy to have that level of that kind of an opportunity to mold and work on something that's and hopefully going to last maybe not even 5 years, but
Definitely less than 5 years, really.
but at least sometime into the future.
Any other questions from the board? I have one.
Okay.
Is there anything in the course of the interviews you've had to date, or your exposure to Reading and the materials that were sent, that struck you as curious, or I don't want to say problematic, but an area that you might want to have more information on? Or is it just standard fare in the area of becoming a town council?
There's an interesting question. That question is unique. I've not heard that question in any interview that we've participated in over the years. So I can't really say that there's anything that struck us as being, out of the ordinary. Your request for proposals was more or less the same as we see from many other towns. We thank you for that, because it makes it much easier for us
I thank
to respond
Microsoft.
to respond to it, because we responded to
You did.
similar
You
questions
did a good job.
in other towns, and we didn't have to. Occasionally, you see one that's completely different, and you say, all right, now that makes it much harder to respond. So we like to see that. Your process is the one I would like to see all towns do, which is to have a preliminary screening committee that poses questions that are relevant to a variety of different boards and officials. So I thought that was very good. Yeah, the timing is a little unusual, because you indicated that you want to make the appointment in June and have us take over on the 1st of July. That is a a little unusual. But it's not unheard of. We started in Hopkinton the day after we were appointed, and you know, sometimes it's necessary to do that, and we'll just deal. I'm not especially concerned about that.
Thank you.
I'll actually just offer one comment. Before we come to an interview, we do our research. You know, it's all on the internet. You can read the local paper. So because we want to have an understanding of what's going on in town. This town is surprisingly free of controversy. I commend you. Because, I mean, we're always looking for, understand their issues, you know, they might have.
Jesus, big.
I wish you didn't say that.
Do you even need a police department, really? So, no, I commend you, because there's not a lot of the stuff we see in our other towns with kind of inter-board squabbling. Seems like everyone's pulling in the same
We have a
direction.
neighborhood town that actually, Board of Selectmen broke into fist fights years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Good
I've
job.
been at situation.
That's not new, is it?
I think that's good. I think that's a testament to the leadership that you put into place. It doesn't, at least to our knowledge, we didn't run across a constantly carping blogger. If the constantly carping blogger is out there, we didn't find him. So.
That's a good question.
I had a question, it's kind of two parts. One, do you do this in any other town? And two, would you be amenable, and what do you think of the idea of holding regular office hours for boards, for officials, for a new relationship especially?
We don't do that in any of our other towns. We can do it. At the beginning of our relationship, it might even seem like it's a good idea. It makes people, we want people to feel comfortable interacting with us, and we are new, so having us physically here from time to time is potentially a good idea, certainly in the getting to know you stage.
Yeah.
I think after that you would continue that for as long as it seems beneficial, and I think everybody needs to be frank about when it is beneficial.
Mhm.
One town that we tried this in once, it didn't go very well because the town administrator, I think, was not behind the idea that, the selectmen decided that, wouldn't this be a great idea for the town administrator to do? And so, it often ended up, here I am, and why don't we just sit around and chat? We didn't really have anything useful for me to be doing. So, if that's the way it's going to turn out, then it's not beneficial to either of us. The other thing to keep in mind is that we're only as good as our network. So, when we're doing, when we're answering questions for you, we're going to be relying on our whole team of lawyers. We're not going to bring the whole team.
Yeah.
Sometimes it will in fact be faster to get an answer to a question you need it really fast if I'm not here, if I'm
Right.
back there.
One of the things that we found useful in a couple of our other towns, however, is, I'm sure you have department head meetings on a regular basis, to go to the department head meetings and start meeting staff and
Okay.
getting a connection with staff and.
Thursday morning.
There you go, perfect.
We'll
We'll
bring
be
the
there.
donuts.
Yeah. That is a very good way to get to know people quickly, and also to hear what their actual concerns are sort of in real time. And you can probably cover more ground in one department head meeting than in 3 hours of office hours. But that said, there's always gonna be a need to meet one-on-one with various people, to discuss something, and, whether we do it, you know, every Friday from noon to 3, or whether we do it on an as-needed basis, we'll leave it to that. We're happy to start doing it on a regular basis and then see how it evolves.
Regular to me was once a month, maybe at the beginning, and once a quarter at the most, longer.
Okay.
And it's really just the reason you didn't read a lot of stuff, and I'll knock on the same what Jim did. We try to work collaboratively, and that means you meet people and you work together, even when there's not a burning issue, you work on the minor issues together, you just have the communication channels open. And when I'm thinking office hours, I was not thinking, we'll see who walks in. I was thinking, here's the script for this next
Okay.
meeting, just to be clear.
As I say, if this is a management issue more than a legal issue.
Yeah.
If you're behind this idea and you manage it,
Yeah.
it can work beautifully. If
Okay.
it's being forced upon you, which apparently
No.
it's not, if it's being forced upon you, you know, it may not work. And I can't make people, you know, show up for office hours.
But I can.
Exactly.
Thank you.
We have one question and then we'll bring it to a close.
I had a question on litigation. What are the main courts you tend to conduct litigation in, and who would be our point person in each of those courts? Do we have?
Okay, well, more and more, because the jurisdiction of the land court has expanded, I would say, more and more we see cases in the land court as probably 50% of all the cases in our office are in the land court. And obviously the Superior Court is the other place where we see a fair number of cases. An awful lot of what we think of as litigation is in fact not in court, but in various administrative agencies. The DPU, the Energy Facility Siting Board, the DEP, and what have you. We don't imagine, the way we would propose to structure this, however, is your point person for everything is me. Not that I'm going to be the person who shows up in court. I might be, but you know, I won't be every time. Certainly in zoning stuff, Chris Heap, our partner, would probably be taking the lead. But I don't. It's important, I think, to the relationship that you not have to say, I think this is a case for Attorney X. Everything comes through me, and you know I will always know what's going on.
So you'll know Chris's strengths and weaknesses.
That's right.
You'll pick the right
He
person.
doesn't have any weaknesses.
He's got a few ones.
So I wouldn't want you to feel like you have to figure out which lawyer in our firm you need to talk to. That's not something you want to have to do.
When we look at it, you know, there's when you're approaching a litigation, you need the town expert, which is Ray. He's going to know more about Reading than anyone else in the firm, and then he'll select. You know, Chris was a law clerk at the land court, so he knows the judges, he knows the guys behind the scenes, he's good at what he does. But so you almost do it together. I do cases, and I know Ray does cases with Chris too. So you're almost you are co-counsel on the case. Chris is doing the underlying litigation stuff, but you're providing the connection to the town, because you don't want to send someone in there with half a load of information, and we can't download the whole thing.
Good.
Well, Mr. Nieres, Mr. Harrington, thank you for coming tonight. Your opening remarks highlighted good humor. I've been thinking about ice cream for the last 4 years.
Interesting you should say that.
Well, we at the next time we meet, we'll bring ice cream. How's that?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
You want to talk about the decision process going forward a little bit?
2 weeks from tonight, the board's scheduled to make a decision. I'll be in touch with everyone before then. Well, before then, they may have some questions and some follow-up.
Okay, we're happy to do that.
Nice to
Thank you
meet
very
you.
much.
Nice to meet you both.
Good to see you again.
Nice to meet you.
Nice
Good to see you
Good to
again.
see you
Good to
again.
see you again.
Nice to meet you.
For having us.
Yeah.
See you, Chief.
Take care, nice to see you again.
This, the color sheet that's in front of you is just a list of all the appendix C and D ratings. Some of them make their packet.
Yeah, I think it's, I'm glad you
I knew when it was coming out, I should have stolen
It's a lot easier to
Like, oh,
see
we were
side by
waiting for
side.
something. This was what I was waiting for.
I thought you sent me some corrections on it, that's why.
I did.
No, I know you did.
But I was waiting for this. That's why I had, like, this is the thing I was waiting for before I filled it out. Because you said, oh, you're gonna get something.
Yeah, he sent it to me.
So, anyway.
Okay, I've got 8:47, why don't we make it 8:52?
Or you, yeah, I think actually Bob sent me a copy. Yep, thank you.
Good evening.
Hi,
Hi.
we're in recess right now, so the camera's not on, just so you know. We start in a couple minutes.
Anything you say can or will be used against you.
Okay, we're back in session. For those at home, you're just joining us, we're going through a series of town council interviews. The second firm tonight is the firm of Deutsch and Williams, And here tonight, I'll let you introduce yourselves if you'd like.
I'm Paul Durensis, with me is Kim Salant and Rich Huxon. Can I say a few remarks?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Please.
Okay. We believe we can make quite a contribution to the town of Reading. We can guide you through the legal minefields, keep you out of trouble. The way I would characterize us is uncommon skills, but common sense. Uncommon skills, I'll tell you something about our background. We're a team. We function with myself being the primary care physician, if you will, to use a medical analogy. It would be my job to keep track of your activities, to attend your meetings, to monitor what goes on. But there are all these specialists. I brought 2, but there are more back at my office. We fit right between the other firms that you're interviewing. We're bigger than the firm you just interviewed. We're smaller than the firm that you have on later on today. So we would say it's like Goldilocks. The bed that's too big and the bed that's too small. Well, we're just the bed that's just right. Since I would be the primary contact, I'd say a little bit about myself first. I'm a graduate of Harvard College, Harvard Law School. I've been admitted to the United States Supreme Court and all the federal courts and state courts in Massachusetts and in New York. I've been classified by Martindale-Hubbell as preeminent. I've been awarded by Boston Magazine as a super lawyer 9 times. The last award, I was one of 10 out of the entire 6-state region that makes up New England. I've been recently appointed to the Board of Medicine by the governor, by which I supervise and discipline doctors, physicians, and keep track of the medical profession. I've been a town council and doing town council work for 30 years. I am currently town council in Cohasset, Canton, Wilmington, Mansfield, and Templeton. Some of those communities we feel are quite comparable to Reading. I've been working on a handbook for selectmen, which is going to be published by the Mass Municipal Association. I have the distinction of having attended 1,178 town meetings, which I believe is a state record. So I know all there is to know about parliamentary procedure, motions, warrants, all of that goes with town meeting. On the common sense side, I've been on both sides of the table. I've just been re-elected to my 7th term as a selectman in my town. I have served as an elected member of a planning board. I understand your planning board is not elected here. But in other communities, planning boards are elected. I was elected. I've served on the finance committee. I've served as president of the Massachusetts Selectmen's Association, which means I've represented all the selectmen in the state. I am currently a member of the Executive Committee of the Massachusetts Selectmen's Association. I've been a board member of the Massachusetts Selectmen's Association for 6 years. I'm on the Executive Committee of the Massachusetts Municipal Association. I have been a board member of the Massachusetts Municipal Association for 6 years. I've been appointed by the governor to the Local Government Advisory Committee, which has jurisdiction over local matters and provides advice to the administration on issues affecting municipalities. Because I've been on both sides of the table, I've been both as a town council and as someone who has to be in your shoes, I can identify with you, your needs. I know the kind of support and help that you need as selectman and as a town manager. Now I'd like to turn it over to Kim Sawan to talk a little about herself, and then to Rich Hudson.
I'm gonna sit if it doesn't.
That's fine. Please.
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kimberly Michelle Salant. My friends call me Kim. Please call me Kim. I'm a trial lawyer. I'm working on 27 years of experience as a trial lawyer. I do all facets of municipal law. I work in the State Superior Court, the State District Court, the United States District Court, the United States District Court of Appeals, the Supreme Judicial Court, the United States, the State Court of Appeals. I've litigated in various administrative forums, including the MCAD, the ABCC, the Housing Appeals Committee, the DEP, and I've also done other various licensing issues. We represent members of the Board of Selectmen. I have represented the Board of Health members, water commissioners, sewer commissioners, road commissioners, conservation commissions, historic district commissions, tax assessors, building inspectors, town managers, licensing authorities, including firearms licensing and alcoholic beverages licensing. I represent planning boards, zoning boards of appeal, to name a few. I've been in private practice for several years. I started out my career working in a large insurance defense counsel firm as a litigator way back in the 80s. I've earned every one of these gray hairs. I've been appointed as special town counsel for over 50 communities, and I was known as the summary judgment queen. What I would be called in is to represent communities when insurance companies made determinations that they needed special town counsel, the town council wouldn't do. I've been known as the summary judgment queen because I argued over 60 dispositive motions in state and federal court. I am undefeated. After I was in private practice, Paul might have mentioned to you last time I have a 97% success rate, well the 3% got flipped, so actually it's higher than that. In any event, after I was in private practice for several years, I became assistant corporation counsel for the city of Boston, also trying cases, undefeated record. I interfaced with corporation counsel and I taught the lawyers who were junior to me. I went to Deutsch Williams in 1997. I went because it's a good choice, and with all due respect, I think it's the very best choice that you can make tonight. I have been at Deutsch Williams for 17 years. Why Deutsch Williams? I wondered what it would be like to be in your shoes, to make this choice, and I thought, because it's the best. As I told the initial selection committee, false modesty is not one of my character traits. Deutsch Williams is not so large that you will be a pin in a map. We are not so small that you will find that we are lacking in any way in terms of experience, practical, and personal. If you need it, we have it. Deutsch Williams is here to serve you and your community. Prior to us responding, we investigated Reading and we said this would be a good fit for us. We believe that we can make a large contribution to you. In this proposal, Paul is your contact person, and I tell you this, and I'm going to say some nice things about him, not because he can give me a raise, because he can't, I'm his partner, but because it's true. I've been with him for 17 years for a reason. One of the things that I think is most outstanding about Paul is nobody that you will meet tonight, before or after us, has the level of experience that Mr. Durensis has. Paul will be your contact person, not someone else. It'll be Paul that's at your town meetings, not someone else. In terms of his background experience as a member of the Board of Selectmen, I think, and I trust that you would think as well, that that's an invaluable experience. Because being in your shoes for over 20 years, I can guarantee you, and I make very few guarantees in life, I can guarantee you there's probably not a question that you have that he hasn't encountered before, either as a member of a Board of Selectmen or in his decades of experience in municipal law. The breadth of his knowledge is vast. He will be your contact person, and I was looking at the competition. I'm familiar with the competition, and one of the things that I do as a lawyer is to look at what their number is, the BBO number. And the BBO number reflects how long you've been in practice, and I see that my competition has BBO numbers in the 6s. And I'm going to tell you something. This guy sitting right next to me, his BBO begins with a number 1. Why DW? Because we are the best. Durensis is not alone, though. We have a team approach. I have brought with you, for you, some additional materials. Now, I know you have a lot of reading materials, and I appreciate that. And I know 2 weeks for the decision you have to make is not a large amount of time. But I would like to share these with you. These are our firm brochures. So you will know it is not just Paul. It is not just Kim. It is not just Rich. It's all of us, and we're all here for you. I've brought additional copies if you need them. I've also brought something with us that I think is very helpful. In addition to providing the regular services that all town council will provide to you, we also provide some additional free services. And those are things like I'm holding in my hand right now. Free of charge, we put together newsletters, both for the municipal department and also for the labor and employment law. Now, I understand that you already have labor council, but I'm suggesting to you that these are at least a good read. They're also highly educational and, as I wrote a couple of them, somewhat entertaining. Please, help yourself. In addition to those free services, we also provide tutorials for boards when they need them. In fact, Mr. Durensis is providing a tutorial along with Mr. Huxham on what it's like to be at the ABCC and how never to get there. And I understand that you folks do that licensing procedure, and we actually invite you to come along. We do 30B procurements, we do contracts, we do 40A zoning work, we do 41 subdivision work, we do 40B affordable housing work. We have many interesting lawsuits that I have been involved in, not the very least of which involved a contractor who was the lowest bidder on a particular project. As you all know, it requires lowest qualified bidder. And I tell you this because it's not just the win for me. It's what the community needs and what the community asks for and what the community wants. In this particular set of circumstances, this lowest bidder was, in my opinion, not qualified. I did some research at DCAM, interesting research at DCAM. Next time you run into this situation, I'd love to talk to you about it. This is not a fly-by-night company. In any event, the community wanted the bidder who was not the lowest bidder, and they awarded the contract. And of course, the bidder, the lowest bidder, went to do litigation against the town. Filed for a preliminary injunction. Preliminary injunctions, for those of you who don't have the experience with them, it's for litigator, it's running at 120%, 7 days a week. So you get about 7 days to put together an opposition to a preliminary injunction. So I did the research at DCAM, and we won the preliminary injunction, and the contractor said, I better get the heck out before it really hits the fan. So he lost, we won, but who really won was the community, because they got the contractor they want, they got the job they want, and they didn't get the contractor who's notorious for the midnight change order. There's a time to litigate, and there's a time not to litigate. I do a lot of work, not only in the state court, I do a lot of work in land court, I do a lot of land use work. And while I can admit to you, it's a lot of fun to win, you want the best result. And sometimes you have to engage in things called ADR, and there's wisdom in that. And I bring to you 27 years of wisdom and what I've learned on those alternative dispute resolution procedures, because let's face it, folks, litigation is not an inexpensive endeavor. And I have become very good at doing procedures such as remands, where I have opposing counsel, because quite honestly, I'm known as a litigator in the community. And I don't think it makes anybody's day when Salant's on the other side of the table, because I'm a formidable opponent, and that's known. And when that is known, what happens is alternative dispute resolution becomes an awfully good prospect for your opposing counsel. So you can go through a remand procedure and get a plan that really fits the community, and get a plan that really works for everybody, as opposed to having a winner and a loser in litigation. I'm confident as to what the outcome would have been in litigation, but what I want is what's best for the community. We're experts in 40A, zoning, subdivision, and probably every aspect of municipal law that you can possibly think of. We do eminent domain, we do community development. So why DW? Because, lady and gentlemen, it's the best choice you're gonna make, because we are the best outfit to fit with you, and we can do the best job for you. So it's an easy choice from my perspective. And now I introduce you to Mr. Huxham.
Good evening. My name is Rich Huxham. I've been practicing law for over 25 years and concentrating my practice during that time in municipal law and land use law. I advise all of the land use permitting boards and officials, the planning board, the zoning board, conservation commission, building inspector. I often also represent those boards during their more complex, longer hearings. We find that avoids a lot of problems when I am there during those hearings to advise them. I often also draft their decisions in those kinds of cases, which tend to be longer and more complex, and we have a very good record of having those decisions upheld when they are appealed. Earlier in my career, I did this kind of work on the private side, and did a lot of work at the land court, in Superior Court, DEP, and I've also served as chairman of my local conservation commission. So I really have the perspective really of seeing these issues from every different side. And it helps me a lot in representing our municipal clients. I also represent our clients in property tax appeals at the State Appellate Tax Board. And we've had quite a bit of success there in these cases. Recently, I've had several victories there in cases involving large office buildings and large, expensive subdivisions. And as a result of these wins, our towns have saved hundreds of thousands of dollars in property tax revenue. So we're very proud of the work that we've done there. I would just like to emphasize the theme that we are the perfect size for you, because we can provide excellent attorneys, excellent advice, excellent representation, but also because of our size, we can give very personalized service. And we think that clearly makes us the best choice.
Just to wrap our presentation up, I want to say that you would be a very important client for us, not one of 100 different clients. You'd be a very important client for us. You would get, as Kim said, personal attention from me, not some youngster. You would have me at your meetings, you would have that resource available to you. And not just at meetings, I'm available 24/7. And my clients feel free to call me at all hours of the day and night. whenever an issue comes up, I wanna be there for you. I would rather cut off something that's gonna lead to a disaster before it happens, rather than try to clean up the mess that might ensue. So, we're here for you, and we would be quite enthusiastic about representing the town of Reading.
I have a few questions, Julie, let me just kick it off. Mr. Durensis, you described that, I believe you had a total of 5 towns that you serve as lead counsel, if my count is correct. Ms. Sally, you serve as lead counsel in how many towns yourself? Or are you strictly on litigation side?
I do litigation work.
Purely.
Purely litigation work. I play to my strong suit, John.
I understand. As you think about the first 100 days or the integration period with a new town, Reading's had town council for many years, we're transitioning now. As you think about that first, whether it's, business, we say it's, you kind of get 90 days to make an impression and to show the value of the hire or show the value of bringing the organization. A little different in this setting, you're mostly trying to keep the status quo, whatever is working and valuable, and identify shortcomings as quickly and to identify remedial plans. How does the first 100 days, first 6 months look in terms of bringing on a town like Reading and getting integrated into the firm? What does that look like?
Well, I'll answer that because I've done this a few times. The first thing we do is to use I'm on the medical board, I've got to use medical examples. And pardon me for my voice, I have lost my voice with a cold. We would give you a physical exam, is the analogy. We would review your bylaws, review your zoning, we would go visit your different boards and committees, we take a look at where you are legally, we'd look at your Town Manager Act, we evaluate you, form a baseline. We would compare what you have with the state of the art. For example, there was a model bylaw, local bylaw for conservation commissions. That was first written maybe 30 years ago. Many communities adopted that bylaw. In the meantime, there are now newer versions of that bylaw based on court decisions, experience, and so on. Do you have the latest local bylaw? Or do you have the old one? Or do you have something in between? We evaluate that, we determine what you have, what we think you should have, we'd write your reports. And by the way, there's no cost to the transition period. We understand you've already invested in your prior council. There's no sense to duplicate that. We give you reports, we tell you what we think needs to be done. With regard to litigation, she would.
We have this program called TCIC, and I've already looked you folks up. You have a lot of litigation at the present moment. You do not have a lot of litigation at the present moment. Believe me, we have clients who have far more litigation than you do. You are fortunate not to have it. And quite honestly, John, I'll tell you, now I say this to everyone, the less you see me, the better off you are. Because that means if you're seeing me, you're involved in litigation. Litigation is not an inexpensive endeavor. And when I was trying to make the point about being a formidable opponent, if someone appreciates your tenacity, I'll be politic and use that word, they are more likely to play ball with you than to go head to head with you. So it's a way that I've been avoiding litigation. Litigation really should be the last thing you resort to. I actually try to work myself out of a job, as ironic as that might sound. When you talk about the first 90 days, I say what we're looking for is a seamless, smooth, quick transition. Okay? Durensis has done this many, many times. Before I came to see you the first time, before I came to see the selection committee, I looked up in litigation. It's very easy to do. And I can tell by looking at the various docket sheets for the litigation you have where you are. For me, it's not rocket science. I can look at the docket sheets without having even to speak with anyone from a firm. So I hit the ground running. Because as a litigator, I'm telling you, my friend, that's what you gotta do. I mean, there's no time for a learning curve, okay? You hit the ground running, and you go full blast. And that's what I envision doing for you folks, but as I said, you don't, at the present moment, have a lot of work for me.
Sure.
And if I do my job right, if we all do our jobs right, we all work together, you won't ever have a lot of work for me unless you get someone on the other side who doesn't yet know me. So that's how I see the transition period: smooth, seamless, quick, painless for you.
Thank you. Any other questions from board members?
Real quick, just in regards to you serving on 5 other, as town council, 5 other communities, as well as board of selectmen role. Do you run into conflicts at all with things like town meeting as they come out from just a pure time standpoint?
Not significant.
Okay.
I've managed to cover, I'm trying to think if there was ever an occasion that I've missed a town meeting. I don't recall that I've done that, but I've been to almost 2,000.
The record, yes.
A lot of town meetings.
Season ticket holder.
What's your hometown and when do they hold their town meetings?
Because I'm on the board of selectmen, I pick the time that there's a meeting, so if you're having a town meeting, I'm not going to schedule a town meeting for when I know that you're having a town meeting.
Any other questions from the board? Bob? Very good.
This is the fun part.
A little bit on the process. Bob, you mentioned maybe a 2-week.
Yeah, during the break I said a few things, but in general, the board is hoping to make a decision June 24th. And the effective date is fairly fast. There's not a lot of transition, just July 1st. We'll be in touch over these 2 weeks with any follow-up questions. The board's gonna take some time, think about it for a few days or whenever they like, and give me feedback and especially questions. Some of the questions may be directed at you, some may be directed at your references. The search committee's already done a lot of reference check, but they may come up with specific questions or interesting questions that we haven't thought of. I'll be in touch before the end of the 2 weeks and let you know how things look. We haven't really talked through, and I don't think that the board will make any decision until the night of June 24th when they all sit there. They might individually talk to me, and I might get some sense of where they're leaning, but until they come on the 24th, I don't think any of us are going to know what they're going to do. So I'll be in touch.
Well, I just thought of an additional point on that transition. Because of my long background as a selectman, I am quite tuned into the needs of selectmen, and I would make quite an effort to get to know all of the selectmen, get to know what their conflicts are, what they need to recuse themselves from. I want to be sure that ethics issues are addressed, that everybody's comfortable with where they are. I want to be sure that I know the direction of the town on issues that we're asked to work on. You'd like to see things funneled through the town manager, but our experience is that towns often, other boards and other town officials get to know the people at our firm and they start calling them directly. We wouldn't want people to be giving questions to us that are contrary to where you want to head. And for that, I do want to attend your meetings. I want to watch how you think, how you vote, what the goals are for the community. I want to get to know the direction that we're heading in so that I become a team member for you. I become a resource for you to help you accomplish what you want to accomplish for the community.
I'm gonna toot Rich's horn just for a second, pardon me. One of the things that Rich has done quite successfully, and I know that you folks are wading through the rewrite of the zoning bylaws morass, which is highly technical and very confusing and is steeped in history. And Mr. Huxham has been very good at helping others do exactly what you're looking for. He's helped to rewrite subdivision rules and regulations, and he's helped to rewrite zoning bylaws for various towns. He's incredibly good at it, and I think that you would do well to appreciate that level of expertise, because as far as I know, he's the best there is at that particular endeavor, and I wouldn't want to be against him at the appellate tax board. But I'm hoping that you take the time to take a look at the pamphlets, the brochures, you get to know all of us, because the three of us are totally different characters from each other and from other members of our firm. But I think we represent where we are in terms of our heads and our hearts. We'd like to be able to work with you. We really do thank you and appreciate the opportunity to come and speak with you. We hope you have some questions that you want to follow up on later. We'd love to talk to you. And I want to thank you for the opportunity. It was nice to meet you.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, nice to see you.
Good to meet you.
Likewise.
Good to see you, girl.
Thanks.
Nice to
Thank
meet
you
you.
for coming in.
Thanks. Nice to see you too.
Thank you.
Good to
Good to
see you
meet you.
again.
Thank you very
I hope
much.
you're feeling better. That nasty cold, I had that one, not good.
Oh, no.
Good to meet you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rich over
It gets
John.
worse after that, unfortunately, it was the one I had. Put me into bed for all weekend, it was nasty.
Thank you very much.
Try emergency, I'm telling you, it's the
Does that
best
work?
stuff. It works,
I
I'm
don't know
telling
if
you.
they brought this attention without.
Nothing to lose, right?
Nothing to lose, right. I don't need it this time,
Your
done
21 year
now.
experience.
Oh, we've done that many times.
Yeah, if you could submit that, that would be good.
Okay.
You could just send me an email.
Supplementary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did send you the supplemental
We did
letter
get
about
that.
different projects.
Okay, yeah, I do
Oh,
have that, it's in
Can
here. I think it's in this packet.
Oh, it's in this, okay.
I noticed that when I started laying them all out. That was
Marcy,
missing.
you have one?
I think the secretary
It's
just.
in the
It's in
packet.
here.
Oh, perfect, thank you so much. I brought some extra
Well,
ones.
it's on this,
I haven't
we
seen.
do a
it.
lot of economic development work.
Oh, okay.
And as part of economic
Okay.
development work, we have to do the
Right,
sites,
as long as we have it.
these sites. So,
Yeah.
we
I
forgot to
think
check a box.
It's right, it's right here, I have it.
Okay, it made it into the
As
packet
long as we have it.
from last time.
Yep, we'll make the updates.
So while I have it, they have it already.
Thank you.
Thank you
Okay?
again.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, folks.
Have a good night.
See you later.
We have a few minutes here. Whoa, wow.
I've been going since 6, but I was up until 2 last night,
You win.
so.
Going since 6 until 2.
No, no, no.
Oh, yeah, 'cause I had
Yeah, I was
no
up
shoes,
until
so
2 and
then-
then going since 6 today, yeah. So Bob, something that Jesse's looking
I
for
feel lazy and
tomorrow night,
tired.
it's just not happening.
Oh, really?
There's
It's
only,
the time to make trouble like this.
I don't think they're meeting tonight, so.
no, they're meeting tomorrow
You
night.
haven't figured out how to add 5
Sometimes
more
it's-
hours into the day yet?
I haven't figured that one out yet. I'm working on it, but I haven't quite figured it out yet.
I only need it for short stints, so if you figure it out, let me know.
I was home watching the Red Sox last night, and you said this thing, you said, "Gotta go."
Yeah,
That was good to do.
I was trying to get it to them. There's
You weren't
actually,
the only.
there's a couple of those things that I would change and move around based on like some additional information from these things, but yeah. That's
know,
really
it's-
just,
it's
that gives you a good
When
reference
there's,
point, right?
when there's 5 people, you always have differences of opinions, but usually there's some kind of message
There's
that's
actually,
common.
well, yeah. When I did my massive RFP, 1,300 questions. 1,300 questions, yes,
For an
not
RFP.
an RFP, 5 people that we sent it to.
How many submitted?
All 5 of them
Oh, fuck.
submitted, although not on all
Yeah.
parts. And I kept telling my team, I assure you want these questions in here, you're gonna have to evaluate every
Absolutely.
one of
Every
them.
one of them, wow.
And they did, and we took, it was a 3-month process, and I had it all like laid out and timed out, and then we actually talked about where we had those outliers. Because we had places, we also had people who, across the board, people had preconceived notions and biases and things like that that were interesting to talk through and, you know. Yeah, it was massive.
You sit on the subcommittee that said here, that was a very different approach than we heard. So I think tonight's was.
That was very good. Were these, the two candidates as far as these been similar presentation as they made?
First was more similar, this one was.
This one was
I
a little
thought
bit
better.
different.
I thought better.
A little bit different. Yeah.
Party.
They'll find us, I saw them walk by.
Okay.
I thought they might be next door.
I think we're, that
A couple minutes.
progress is
It
fast,
is, yeah,
so.
yeah.
Sometime
It
before,
was
like,
2 minutes.
my term is up. or the-
You know what,
I'd like to fix that clock.
it was exactly on
It
time.
gets fixed. The
There
problem
was
is,
one
it's just
day,
not-
it was exactly on
Yes.
time. I'm
It's
thinking,
anxious
I'm
for you to
here,
leave.
I'm the first one here, I'm cheering for you. I'm here on time, nobody else is here.
Right, that's right.
Everyone else was late. I'm like, okay, nobody's here to see that I am on time every
We
now and
we
then.
have television, Marcy.
Sorry.
I know there's nobody else here, I'm not sure they even started recording.
Deutsch, Williams, Brooks, Durensis, and Hall.
This is really hard. I spent
This is very hard.
3 hours on Sunday going through this material. I was trying to commit it to memory. It's too much.
Oh, committed to
Yeah,
memory.
yeah.
Well, you know, just
Yeah.
scan it and
Right.
who's what and
Yeah.
who does what. It's really difficult. I can't imagine the amount of time the committee spent.
It's sort of burned into our engrams, I think, so well.
How many meetings?
Just one set of interviews. Tonight, discuss
Good evening.
different things with different people.
Hi, good evening. Come on up.
Come on.
Hello? Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you doing?
Very good, very good.
Good to see you again.
You as well, thank you much.
I'll give you a little bit of an overview of the process, just to get us started. You're the third and final candidate for tonight. The board, over the next 2 weeks, 2 weeks from tonight, they'll meet and make a final decision. And over the 2 weeks, I expect they'll have lots of questions. Some of them will be for me to do some research on, perhaps by myself with some of your references. Some of them may well be directed back to you. I don't know the nature of the questions, so I would expect that you'll certainly get a lot of feedback from me and interaction with me over the next week or so. How much is up to the board. Tonight, I think if you take 10 minutes or so to give an overview, give some kind of a presentation of who you are and what you do, and then the board may have a lot of questions. The selection committee met in advance and decided what the questions should be in general. We more or less stuck to that script and then asked you a lot of other questions as issues came up. This board has decided just to, kind of freestyle it. Whatever you present, whatever they might ask is not rehearsed and not scripted. We haven't followed the same script all the way through, just so you know. Lauren, if you want to introduce everyone.
Certainly, thank you. My name is Lauren Goldberg, Copeland and Page. I'm the managing partner there. This is Mark Rich, my colleague, and Darren Klein. All of us are members of the firm. The law firm of Copeland and Page is, on behalf of Copeland and Page, we want to thank you for having us here tonight. We appreciated our meeting with the selection committee, and we're intrigued by the questions that you had asked us, so thank you for your time for that. We know that you have our proposal, and we don't want to repeat everything in there, but I'll give a brief overview of the firm and the way it approaches legal services. Essentially, we have a small team of lawyers that's dedicated to your town and to you, and within that team, there's people that have different areas of expertise, although we're all municipal law generalists. Darren deals with a lot of school law, labor and employment, and general municipal law. Mark does a lot of procurement, environmental, a lot of parliamentary procedure, town meetings, and I do a lot of town meeting, municipal finance, conflict of interest, public records, very much of a strict generalist. And so the three of us would be your main primary contact team with me acting as the gatekeeper, interacting with the manager and with you all if you have questions, and then together with Mark and Darren, doing most of the work that you send our way. In addition, though, to the 3 primary contacts that you would have, we have a firm of 40 municipal law specialists, and the other members of the firm are available to assist in whatever way and with whatever might be needed in terms of particular areas. So for example, if there was a complicated real estate transaction, we would look to John Eichman to assist us with that. If there were a particularly interesting school matter, we might ask someone from our procurement group who deals mostly with school projects to come in on that. We have found that in that way, and if it was litigation, perhaps Jackie Cowan would be involved. One of the true benefits that gives to the 3 of us is that we are available 24/7 to assist you with whatever you need in whatever time frame is the right time frame for getting back to you. If you need an answer that day, you're gonna hear back from us that day. If you need a written opinion that has a lot of case law in it, then we're gonna develop that and get that back to you as well. Unlike a litigator, though, who has to run around from court to court all week, we're mostly found in our offices. Although we do have meetings outside the office, but we don't have that kind of hectic court schedule, and that makes us well situated to act as primary contact attorneys for towns. In terms of the firm, you should know that we all are devoted essentially to municipal law. The firm itself is 98% of our work is public sector work. We never represent private entities against towns. We take that very seriously. Just try to think. One of the most important aspects of our representation is communication. We truly believe that the one and only way to represent you well is to listen to what your needs are and to the issues that you identify as important and be able to respond to those. In addition, we take proactive counseling very seriously as well. So if you present us with a set of facts or a scenario and you haven't spotted issues that we think are very important, we're not going to spend your money on those issues, but we're going to tell you, have you thought about this? Have you asked this question? We really think we need those facts before we move forward. So we really try to help you prioritize as well. We typically will deal with department heads and with the manager on a daily basis, and we really also believe that the plus side of communication is to have a clear channel for what we're authorized to do and what we're not. And that works particularly well in a town like this one, where a lot of the requests or most of the requests come through the town manager or through people that the town manager is essentially identified as people that can have access to counsel. And that helps us control your budget. We are very much aware of the limited resources that cities and towns have, and particularly over the past few years. And one of the things that we really pride ourselves on is being able to leverage our experience in different types of governments and in different cities and towns to bring to bear that experience on to your situation, so that we're not, when you're looking at a marijuana treatment center bylaw, we've essentially pioneered the way in that, pioneered the way through that kind of forest, in that we've worked with the DPH, we've come up with our own sample bylaw, and we help you to tweak that so that you're not paying for us to do all of the research every single time. And there are times when towns are at the cutting edge and they're the ones that are kind of pushing forward ideas, and we love that, we're happy to do that. But it because of the way that we work in our office, that information and that kind of training and experience benefits you in many respects. And then lastly, one of the things that we really focus on is training and updating on other legislative and other types of developments of interest to you. So we have a number of training sessions that we do depending on what you want, and we work with you to identify those. And in addition, we send e-updates and client memoranda, and we do webinars, all directed towards providing you with the tools that you need to make good decisions. And one of the things that we've found that's really useful is it helps neutralize the training so that it doesn't seem like you're trying to target a particular board. Oh, this board hasn't, been complying with the open meeting law. Well, we don't have to focus on them. We can focus on all boards generally. And so that's a way to get a lot of people the information that they need, the same information, told the same way for the same purpose. And we found that to be a very successful model and something that our clients really rely on. So just to backtrack a little bit about me, I came from the Secretary of State's office, which was really my first job out of law school. I worked in the Public Records Division, so that was my introduction to municipal law. And since that time, I moved from there to the Elections Division, worked a lot with city and town clerks in both of those positions, and have maintained that relationship for years. And also working with the Attorney General's office in both of those positions, and that's really given me a great ability to access support from the state side of things in terms of vetting bylaws, vetting open meeting law issues, and that's been a real resource for me. And now I've been with the firm for 14 years and been involved in any kind of open meeting law, public records, elections matter that you can think of, and you probably wouldn't want to think of some of the things that I've dealt with. But overall, it's one of the hallmarks of our representation is that many of us have come from the public sector where we really had exposure to these issues from the other side, so or from your side. So that's been extremely useful.
I'll jump in. Yeah, I'll jump in for a second. And Mark, Rich, Coleman and Page, of course. My background, I've been practicing law now, I hate to admit it, but for more than half my life. And I started off as assistant city solicitor for the city of Everett. Worked for a long time there. Basically ran that office for the time that I was there. Had full exposure to everything from dramatic enforcement actions, working very closely with our Board of Health, and working on an intensive enforcement practice in a very, very densely populated city situation, working with the drafting of legislation and ordinances, and not so much bylaws there, of course, ordinances and rules and regulations, procurement documents, environmental issues, some very, very significant environmental initiatives. And as part of that, I actually came in contact with Coleman and Page when I was in-house with the city. I hired Coleman and Page to come on board for a site assignment matter there. Got to know the firm at that time, and as you can imagine, when administrations changed and it was time for me to make a change myself, I called up Coleman and Page and slotted right in there. Been very proud to be with the firm. It's a firm, as Lauren explained, that has a sense of the mission. We most of us do come from a complementary background and come in with our own backgrounds, able to assist in a myriad of issues that municipalities encounter. We like to think that we've seen just about everything, and then we come to a new community and find out there's always a new wrinkle to each problem. The benefit that we have is having seen so many aspects and so many different issues, we can jump in even to these unique issues and help you to find a solution to your problem, always working with you to find the solution ultimately that you want to have happen based upon the facts and the circumstances of the situation, so we can guide you in the most effective and efficient manner. So again, my background, it's been a very exciting ride. I've never been on the private side. I've always been a public sector attorney, and I'm very happy to continue in that role.
Very quickly, because I know you have a lot of questions for us. My name is Darren Klein. I'm head of the firm's education law practice group, as well as the firm's labor and employment practice group. I know I've been doing this a while when the firm now describes me on the website as having 2 decades of experience. When they don't describe you in years anymore, you know you've been doing this a while. I spent a couple years on the quote-unquote dark side. I worked for a public sector union between 1995 and 1997. Those 2 years seem longer than the 18 other years that I've spent working for Copeland and Page. But that was really a great training ground, and I think if you look at a lot of labor and employment attorneys in the public sector, they come from the union side because labor law is a little different. The law, if you're involved in a case, in a labor case, the next day everyone's got to come to work, and the case ends, but the unions and the management have to come to work the next day and work together, and so I really learned a lot about sort of the labor relations part of labor from seeing things from the other side, knowing how unions think, and just having a really good aspect of you have to be very aggressive when litigation arises, but at the same time always keeping an eye on the relationship part of labor relations. Of particular interest, I think, to the town of Reading is I have worked in very similar situations to I think what your proposal calls for, working with both the school side of government and the town side of government. I operate in a very similar capacity in Burlington and in Swampscott, where I represent both the town side of government on certain issues and the school side of government on certain issues, and I would like to think that I have a good reputation in sort of being able to bring collaborative approach to issues that affect both the town and the schools, which many issues do now. I mean, I think consolidation of services is a big buzzword going on right now, and I have a lot of experience in that area, and I'm able to sort of understand the different nuances between the town and school government, but also the similarities and the common goals that both sides of government have. And the last thing I'll just sort of comment on that Lauren and Mark both touched on, I think what our firm really brings is we bring the expertise of over 40 municipal attorneys, but we bring it in a small firm approach. And what I mean by that is you're going to get the benefit and the expertise of over 40 municipal attorneys, but you're going to get it by dealing with 3 of us or maybe 4 of us for the most part. So we're not going to make you have to call 35 different attorneys, but we're going to bring you that knowledge and that experience of over 40 attorneys, but bring it to you through a lens of 3 or 4 of us that are really available to you at any time. So with that, I'm sure you have a lot of questions. I look forward to answering them.
I'll break the ice. So it's interesting tonight listening to the opening remarks on each of the firms. We often think of law as getting involved when things are going wrong and making them right. And I think of Reading is more, probably we do largely what we do is correct, and where our town council gets engaged is keeping us on that straight and narrow. With that as a backdrop, which is kind of keeping the good things good, if you will. One of the questions I've asked each of the groups tonight in various ways is what does that first initial integration period look like, whether it's a month or 3 months or 6 months? Describe what that looks like as you bring a new client on board.
Well, I should start by saying that we provide for a transition process where we do not charge for any of that. Transition to us is a process, and the most important part of the beginning is you being able and willing to communicate to us what is important to you, what the community's goals are, what has worked well with your current council, what might not have worked well with your current council, what matters are ongoing, what the, whether it's a library project or the charter or the bylaws. We need to know all the things that are of value to you. We also want to get your feedback. It's important for us to understand where you will want to see us more and where you won't want to see us as much. And we like to get a feel for that. And so that would be us working with the manager, us coming to Board of Selectmen's meetings, us meeting with town staff, department heads. Sometimes we do a meet and greet where we would come in on a Saturday, and anyone who wanted to come by and meet us can do that, go to a department head meeting. The beginning, and also looking at the litigation status reports, sitting down to talk about what the strategy is in any ongoing cases so that we have a feel for exactly how we should be proceeding. And we want you to be able to use your budget in the most effective and efficient way. And to be able to do that, as we've said a few times, and it sounds repetitive, but it's a real theme for us, is we need to be able to communicate in order to ensure that your budget isn't being spent on matters that really aren't of importance to you. So the beginning period is a learning period, and you will see a lot of time on the bills that say no charge next to it. And again, we like to schedule both formal and informal opportunities for that kind of communication at the start.
One of the things, of course, that's really critical with transition is to make sure that we get a very quick handle on any litigation or outstanding cases that you have. We certainly want to make sure that we know of any deadlines that are coming up, so that there's a seamless process from the withdrawal of prior counsel to the new appearance from new counsel. We want to make sure that we know any deadlines that are coming up, that we have the opportunity to review any pleadings or documents that have already been filed, and that we know about any filing deadlines that we have to undertake. If there's discovery that's ongoing, that we can jump in quickly. We want to know what kind of cases they are, so we can assign the appropriate attorneys. If they're land use, if they're enforcement cases, zoning cases, if there are real estate issues that have significant time deadlines, we would devote very quickly to reviewing all the files and again, talking to the town manager and all the appropriate staff and department heads to make sure that if there are deadlines, we could jump in both feet and avoid anything from slipping through the cracks. We don't like to see that in the view.
One of the things too that I think helps us with transition is we really understand the similarities, but yet also the nuances between different towns and different cities. And so we're really gonna come in having a really good understanding of how the town of Reading government is set up, as far as which departments and forms of government have the various authorities. But then also, we're gonna wanna really sit down and talk, okay, now how does everything operate within that structure? So that's almost, we really like to form sort of that very solid base to work from. And, we understand it's every town may be similar, but there are some real important differences on how a town is set up and structured and how it operates.
Actually, Vector, often, what did your review of Reading and preparing for tonight tell you about us that's different or unique?
Oh, well, I think, obviously, we represent a lot of towns similarly, but you have obviously a representative form of town meeting, which isn't unique, but it's still more towns have the open town meetings. I know that obviously you have a town manager form of government, which is a very common structure that we deal with. Lauren, you want to talk about some of that?
Yeah, I think, what we were reviewing both the charter and the bylaws, and we definitely see there are similarities between, for example, the town of Burlington and the town of Dedham in terms of your setup with a 5-member board of selectmen, a town manager with, there's a sliding scale of authority that a town manager can have with respect to appointments, but that, the town manager has more authority than a town administrator. And then also with the 5-member board of selectmen, which is something that the bigger the town and essentially when you are more likely to have a 5-member board of selectmen with a representative form of town meeting. We work very closely with town managers and towns with representative form of town meeting, particularly with respect to preparing for town meeting and understanding that the town managers needs and the board of selectmen need a particular level of support that's quite different than in an open town meeting. And so that part of our role, for example, I assist the town manager in Dedham in preparing for town meeting each year, and often Burlington and Chelmsford as well. And it's quite a different experience in terms of the collaboration with the town. So, that's something that we really like, and we feel like we have a very good approach in terms of the way that we manage that internally. So.
We also see in this community the balance between commercial development and residential. We see different types of development in all of our communities. We go from the very small rural communities to significantly developed communities to much more city type communities. Reading has a very, what we see as a very comfortable balance between commercial, residential, obviously much less in the way of industrial than a lot of other communities do. So we know the concerns that the town has of balancing those needs, dealing with the population, dealing with the revenue sources that differ from communities that have the larger industrial base. The effort to pull the residents into the whole discussion on how to manage the community, the communication that you have with your residents, similar when we talk about the communication we want to have with you, just balancing those needs, again, weighing, not wanting to overstress your residential population and dealing with the commercial use as well.
And I could just add too, one of the things that we see, for example, if you look at Dedham, which is virtually the same size as Reading, but it has a very different revenue base because of Legacy Place. And so they're able to do a lot of things that I'm sure would be great. But what they've done with their meal tax and their hotel tax is an interesting way of dealing with it. And they put it essentially each year, they appropriate an amount equal to the hotel and motel tax into essentially a capital stabilization fund. And so that type of thing, knowing that that's how they're dealing with those revenues, is the type of thing that we can provide and offer in terms of, when you're looking at, well, gee, how do we prioritize capital projects, and how do we, with the revenue sources we have, how do we set that aside? How do we kind of put people on notice? We don't really want to touch that. We want to save that. We want to look at our buildings over time. How do we develop that kind of a capital plan? And so experience in a town like Dedham, again, with the same number of residents, gives us that kind of perspective and the ability to weigh in, when asked, but also as we're just listening to what your planning process is.
And I think one area that's unique, that's exciting to us, is that the town and the school district are really already working collaboratively together on issues, and even the way you share council services. We're a big believer that we have a real value that we can offer to both sides, especially the school side, because we know we come in with so much more experience in issues like municipal finance, public records, open meeting, quarry, HIPAA, all these areas that apply that really very similarly to towns and schools. In many places, they have completely separate counsel, and one that's not economically efficient, but two, I don't think a lot of the school side firms have the experience and the depth of knowledge we have in those core general municipal areas that really apply so strongly to schools. So I think the fact that you already have a system in place where you're working together on those issues and sharing counsel on other services, it gives you a great sort of head start to where we see a lot of municipalities going in the future, and we're a big believer.
Any questions from the board?
So, we actually are in the process of rewriting our zoning bylaw, and just wondering how you would plug into that, sort of who's the team expert on that?
So we knew that you were rewriting your zoning bylaws. There was a RFP for that earlier in the year. We actually have a person at the firm who really has been quite involved with several zoning bylaw rewrites. But we would likely have that person kind of take a look at what you wind up believing is the finished product. And we do that quite frequently. A lot of towns will do a review with general code of their bylaws, and Dedham is an example again, because they did that. They paid general code to do a review of their bylaws. They got back this 375-page manuscript, and they took that. The bylaw review committee looked at it for about a year, and they took that and they said, Lauren, please do something with this. And so, that's what we did. We looked it over. We looked at what the recommendations were. We had our own ideas and recommendations. And after maybe 2 or 3 meetings with the bylaw review committee, we're able to really fine tune what we felt was important that hadn't been addressed. And we would do the same thing. I mean, we would be introducing ourselves to your zoning bylaw at the same time. So getting some of the history there and understanding what some of the challenges have been would be very important for us to weigh in.
You get the history pretty quickly since it's 1928. It's the last time we did the major rewrite.
Wow,
so
that's significant.
You get the history right there.
It is interesting that some of the RFPs we've seen put out by even some of our own client communities have asked for a team to do the bylaw review that would include legal help. And we usually remind our clients, we can do that. Because sometimes they think we need someone specialized to do that. And for you, obviously, there's a benefit to having new counsel because we need to get up to speed on your zoning bylaws anyway. So at the same time, we would almost be feathering right in to that review process and making our suggestions. We work with them so regularly. We work with the zoning regulations of communities throughout the state, and we see so much of it. We have a lot of ideas of how zoning can function, and we've seen good ones, we've seen really bad ones. And we've seen really old ones. We've had some communities that had no zoning until maybe 10 years ago, believe it or not. No zoning at all, which is a scary thing. So we've run the gamut. We have a very thriving land use practice. They meet on a regular basis, and weekly. Sometimes it seems like even more. And they always serve cookies, so we love to go to their meetings. And they keep right on top of the latest. The issue right now, again, it's always a hot issue, is Article 97 and how that impacts land use issues. But they're very much in touch on the latest case law and review of interesting bylaws and regulations that have come through. And we would be very happy to help with that process.
Article 97, for those of us who don't know that.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's Article 97 of the state constitution that restricts the use of open space and parkland and conservation property. And we just come across it very often when communities want to reuse certain property, and it has to be determined what the origin of that property was to determine whether it's held in such a way as to be restricted to that open space and conservation use.
If I might just weigh in on this as well, I think this is also an example of the value that Copeland and Page brings to town council services, and that is we are able to do a zoning bylaw review or a town charter review or a town bylaw review. We, in towns where I'm not the primary contact, as soon as there's a charter, someone will call, Lauren, do you have time? Can you take on, the charter for the town of whatever? We do that with zoning bylaws, we do that with regular town bylaws, and it's because of how much we have seen in terms of bylaw provisions, charter provisions. We really have a great perspective in terms of being able to say not whether you should or shouldn't have a particular bylaw. That's a policy decision, that's up to you. But to know that there are these bylaws out there and how they're working and what the struggles have been and what haven't been. If we just take the zoning for a second, this idea of the moratorium on locating medical marijuana treatment centers. Well, we gave advice on that. We were one of the first bylaws that were approved by the Attorney General's office. And also, working with them, we knew that it was very unlikely they were gonna approve a moratorium for more than a year. So we've been advising our clients for over a year that they cannot just come and extend their moratorium, and they cannot just adopt a new moratorium, that they really have to be undertaking a planning process and be ready to move to that next step. So those types of things are matters that we all are aware of and talking about. And although it may, seem like we're policy wonks, which we are in some ways, we do enjoy the intellectual part of this as well as the kind of day-to-day legal practice. So, we try to provide the information that you might want. Again, not ever saying to you, oh, this is the way you have to go, or you must have a bylaw like this, so.
But an interesting point to touch on something that Lauren briefly touched on also is we have a very close relationship with the Attorney General's office. Obviously, when your bylaws are going up for review, that's always kind of a tense moment. We've dealt with them quite a bit. They call us up very often in advance of giving their decisions to our clients. They'll call us up and say, all right, did you guys think about this? Yeah, convince me. How'd this issue arise? What was the history of it? And very often we'll get them to say, all right, it sounds like you actually have thought this out. Maybe we'll give you a caution, or maybe we won't say anything at all, and we'll leave it to you to work it out. That relationship has led to us kind of knowing what they see and being able to anticipate. It also allows us to give them a call in advance and say, hey, the Reading folks are talking about doing this. What have you seen? What do you see as the pitfalls from your review process? We'd rather hear from them if we think something is really interesting. We'd rather hear from them in advance and give them a window, an opportunity. They like that, we like that, and then we can come back to you and say, the AG is going to have this kind of an issue or not, and this is what we bring as experience having gone through that review process.
And not only with the AG, with the Department of Revenue
Right,
and the Elections
right.
Division and the Public Records Division and the Attorney General's Charitable Gift Division and it's, and the DEP, and so throughout the state, we have these working relationships that really are very important to our day-to-day practice. Just today, we were working with a community on a MSBA project, and they had included something in a vote that they didn't want. We had bond counsel involved, and the MSBA, within a few hours to say, yes, this is the way to chart a course forward, so that the town could act on that tonight without any risk to them. So those relationships are very valuable to us in our day-to-day and to our clients.
Any other questions from the board?
You hear the bells chime.
Gord, how many towns are you lead counsel for now? I know you sent it to us, I just don't.
Yeah, I think it's about 7. I don't have it memorized. But, I think one of the things that is extremely useful in terms of our practice is, as I said, if a litigation matter comes up, I'm not the one that's going to litigate it, except if it's a recount or a recall issue or an election issue, then you can bet it will be me. But in terms of that, so it's my availability is always, essentially you call, I answer.
This is the
People
obsessive
laugh at
thing you
me.
may recall
Yeah.
we talked about.
People laugh at me because they'll text me from a meeting saying, what's the answer to this? And I, get right back to them like, what are you doing? Do you ever, take time off? But that's something that you'll find from all of us. And because of the way that our office is organized, and it's, been over 40 years that Copeland and Page has taken this approach. Leonard Copeland developed this approach, and it's worked extremely well. We're able to balance the needs of our clients, and it's quite unusual that there is such a competition for need that it impacts you in any way. It's very, very rare that anything comes up where we have to say, oh gee, can I get back to you on that tomorrow because I'm dealing with a crisis in another town. So that turns out to be kind of a red herring in terms of concerns, although certainly I acknowledge that when you see a list, you say, ooh.
Just attending town meeting.
Yeah.
Cause now you said that's there's only a limited number of nights in
Oh,
that
gosh,
timeframe, right?
We have a
We're
plan.
down to a science on town meeting.
Yeah.
There are nights when we're all talking about where we are on the road, but we have a great balance for that, and we've been able to address that and always make sure that the appropriate person is at your town meeting.
And I think we told you, I'm sorry, I think we told you before that we start planning now. It's July, we start planning now.
Right.
Most of your town meetings are scheduled way in advance. We pull that information, we contact the town clerk directly, we find that out, we put it together in a list, and we start scheduling. And again, it's very rare that, if I'm your primary counsel, it's very rare that I wouldn't be at your meeting. Luckily, not every town has a meeting on the same night. So.
And to the extent that there's a conflict, and what Lauren says is true, in July, a email will go out with a schedule of all of our towns throughout the year that we're supposed to fill in as soon as we know. And in most of our towns, not all, but I'd say about 80% at least, the town meetings are pre-scheduled by charter or bylaw. So we know when we look at that schedule and we determine where there are conflicts, not in April or May for your Springtown meeting, but literally in July or August.
Yeah, and if there were a conflict that was unavoidable, let's say there was a town with an extremely dicey charter issue, and it made sense for me to be there even if I wasn't primary counsel. Well, if that happened to conflict with another town, again, we'd know about it way in advance, but we'd have a conversation with you about it. We would talk about it. Who would you be most comfortable with covering? And that's why we also have a primary contact team, because while certainly the primary contact strives to be present 100% of the time, if there were a conflict, you have 2 other people that are very involved in your day-to-day who would know exactly how to handle the matters.
And there's a flip side to that also. There are going to be times, and it's usually not for your annual town meeting, more likely for a special town meeting, but sometimes at the annual, you may have a hot button topic that would be best addressed by a very specific person, somebody who's been working on a particular project. And very often we bring other people with us to town meeting so they could jump in if there's an issue. But there are times when somebody else is the right person. But among the three of us, we do a lot of the town meeting training. We conduct training sessions for our associates. We kind of bring them up, we give them the war stories and go through the statutes and make sure that they know, because we consider town meeting the big show. That's when you're out in front of the public, you're out in front of your town meeting members. There's a lot of pressure, everything is happening then. So we're gonna make sure that your town meeting, from our end, from working on the warrant, the motions, working with the moderator, working with the members, that it goes as smoothly as it can possibly go, because we all know that that's not the place for mistakes. That's not the place where you wanna be unprepared.
And even though it is our opportunity to sort of be out in front of the public, we also know our place at town meeting. And that is only when the town moderator calls for us to speak, or the Board of Selectmen asks us to speak on a certain issue.
We're your tool.
Any other questions from the board?
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
very much, pleasure to be here.
Thank you again.
Enjoy the rest of the night.
Thank you.
Nice to see you again.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet you.
Nice to
Thank
meet
you.
you.
Very nice to meet you.
Good to see you again. I'm glad I got to stay for the whole time.
Yes, that is nice.
Good to see you again.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Good to see you again.
Lee.
Good to see you as well. Take care.
Have a good night.
Thanks.
Good night.
We also brought, so that must bring us to PNC. So, in our packet tonight, we have a proposal to renew the regional health agreement.
Yeah, and I can just speak to that in 30 seconds. When we started this, it was really to share one person. Along the way, it's sort of morphed and evolved into sharing more than one person, but the agreement didn't necessarily reflect that in my mind very well. So I rewrote all this. Melrose has in-house counsel. I worked with Melrose's counsel and we worked it out. Now so there's no substantial change, other it's now worded properly for the actual things we're doing. So it's more than just sharing a person. There's literally no other significant change to this other than organizing the document a bit and cleaning up some terminology. It's a one-year agreement.
So
as
you're
the board
starting on your law
indicated.
degree?
Yeah, well, I've done the best I can. We didn't have any disagreements, so it was fairly simple. And as I've said before, I'll say it again, the key to regionalization is Mayor Dolan is great to work with. It's as simple as that.
Bob, I may have tripped up unintentionally the group. My question to the council earlier was, did we do the conflict of interest with all the regional groups as well, in addition to just the town already? Like Melrose, like what? To the extent that there'd be an issue.
For reference checks, yeah.
No, if it was ever an issue that I'm making this up, pitted Wakefield, Reading against Melrose, we've got this.
Well, if for instance, Melrose and Reading shared the same council in some way, the general industry practice is you both recuse yourself, you both have to go hire a special counsel.
That would only be on a specific issue relative to.
Only, absolutely, you could share town council with Melrose and Reading, 99% of the time, maybe more, perfect. It's just the one issue where there was possibly a health issue, in this case, for instance, you'd want to have two councils.
Sounds like that's pretty minimal.
Okay. Any questions from the board?
No.
If not, I will entertain a motion.
Move the Board of Selectmen approve the intermunicipal agreement between the City of Melrose and the Town of Reading for shared public health services for a term expiring June 30th, 2015.
I'll second that.
Marcy will second. Number two, we've lost Paul.
Yeah.
Yes, don't
She,
keep
He,
track.
He's been on it.
he told her she could go.
He
She
did.
was quite
He
excited
was
about that.
A long drive.
Any discussion? If not, those in favor? 4-0. Good. Moving on to
C1.
We discussed that earlier, the two significant changes are to change the term facilities director to assistant DPW director, the person staying the same, and then the library director appoints just one member instead of two, and the town manager appoints one member instead of 0. The trustees approved this a week or so ago.
This is good work.
The one question I had on this was, maybe it was just the late hour I read this, some of the shells down below in the aftercase felt like they could be tightened up a bit, just as the, this is what the library committee, right?
Mhm.
Go to the meeting example. Like number 6, monitor the construction process.
Yeah.
It felt like it was bordering, going beyond the advisory and into.
Yeah.
Yeah, and-
That one sentence actually did strike me, that seemed like they were actually asking that Joe do that as opposed to the building committee do that. So it's almost like,
The
seemed
OPM
like
did
it was
it?
an oversight or something.
Yeah, the intent of 6, as I understand it, is the library building committee as a body that's generally gonna meet once a month during construction, so not that often, is meant to just review the budget and see if the general project's on track, again, at an arm's length or a couple of arm's
Milestone
lengths.
review.
So they're intending to meet second week or so of the month after the monthly bill roll has hit. It's not at all day-to-day, week-to-week stuff.
So it seems like it would be better off saying, review the construction process, working with it, to determine how it's, with respect to construction contract timelines and costs. That's really what they're saying they're doing, right?
Yeah, monitor and review
guess
to me are
monitor.
similar. It's not an active role, if you will, it's keep your eye on
I
it.
think of monitoring as being a little more active, a little more
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
oversight.
This is more,
You know?
this is more reporting.
Yeah. It's another set of eyes. The town accountant looks at it, I look at it, the project manager looks at it, the hired owner's project manager looks at it, it's another group.
You don't see a conflict here then where, in your capacity, the new version is these activities might be more than advisory, be seen as more than advisory.
I'll just reflect what David Hutchinson said as the chair of both the library building committee and the trustees, that under the Reading Town Charter, the town manager is responsible for building improvements, end of sentence.
Public buildings.
So they run the building, but the town manager has the authority to improve a building. So they understand that if there's a conflict, effectively the town manager wins. I don't intend to win, I intend to work with them, but I don't think I see any conflict in terms of differing opinions. We've already seen in the last week or two some really good progress.
Okay.
That's great.
All right, any other questions? If not, we'll entertain a motion.
Move the Board of Selectmen approve the revised ad hoc library building committee, including a change from facilities director to the assistant DPW director, and a reduction from 2 to 1 members of 1 member appointed by the library director, and an increase from none to 1 member appointed by the town manager as requested by the Board of Library Trustees.
I'll second that.
We have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? 4-0. Okay, that brings us to the approval of minutes, I think, of May 10.
I saw one.
Move the Board of Selectmen approve the minutes of May 10th, 2014 as amended.
We have a second.
Yeah,
Any
second.
discussion, any comments on minutes?
I actually did have a couple of minor edits. 14, is that one the, I don't know which one that is.
Which one? The 10th is the retreat.
Oh, we're talking about the 14th though now, right?
This is May 10th.
No.
May
Oh, okay, we're talking again, okay. I did have a couple of minor changes. I
Okay.
actually gave those to Paula earlier tonight.
Oh, okay.
I don't have them now though, so I
Okay.
will attempt to tell you what they were, but they were mainly things where the wording was such that the wording was a sentence but didn't actually reflect what we had talked about. It was just, minor typo kind of things.
Okay.
Or where something sounded similar, but it really, and so that's what I gave to her.
It might be.
The only substantial change I would say is on page 2, section C. There's this little sentence, a couple of sentences, schools are slightly below the median rate of pay in town government. Well, no, I guess it was the one below that. How we measure the cost of a pupil isn't good. So really what I restated that as is, for example, the cost per pupil isn't necessarily the best measure. So that it was more reflective of what we really talked about.
Okay.
So the others were truly minor.
You have all of those?
it's up to the board whether to wanna see the changes
Yeah.
or just accept her word. I don't have a problem either.
I guess you've sent them already too.
Yeah, I gave them,
No,
here.
I think something's,
Yeah.
just fine, that's good.
All those in favor of the minutes as amended? I guess we already motioned them. All those in favor of them? 4-0.
Move the Board of Selectmen approve the minutes of May 27, 2014 as amended.
I have,
Second that.
okay, thank you. I had one comment. It says Ruth Urell in several places, but it seems to
We
be
did
Ruth
catch
Clay.
that. Ruth Urell herself caught that.
Yes.
It wasn't there. We did make that change. It might not be in print there.
She did a scan on her name to see where
Right,
it was
maybe.
mentioned.
It's like doing with chicks.
Yeah, exactly.
Right job.
Actually, a friend of ours that is spending time in New Hampshire, and you know who I mean, also caught that little thread.
Ah, there's a surprise, huh?
All right, I had no other comments other than that.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, all those in favor of the minutes? 4-0.
And executive?
So-
I think we better skip those, because Marcy has pointed out a flaw.
But it
so-
is, it's purely administrative in nature.
Okay.
So it's just that I did attend the meeting, and I did vote to adjourn at the end. That is
Okay.
really the only change that I had to that, so in my mind,
I remember that now.
I-
I
I was
do
on the
remember that.
phone,
I didn't think
and I
of it
did
when I was doing
participate
that.
remotely, so I don't actually think we have to wait necessarily.
No, you're right.
To vote that
You were there.
unless someone else has a.
I'll vouch for you. Move the Board of Selectmen approve the executive session minutes of May 27, 2014 as substantially written. You have to say as written to be fully compliant, I guess I do.
Okay,
As written.
do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion? Okay.
Roll call.
This is a roll call vote. So Dan and.
Yes.
John Urbina, yes. Marcy West.
Yes.
Kevin Sexton.
Yes.
And John Halsey will abstain. Okay. If there are no other comments, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second. John Urbina. All those in favor? 4-0. We adjourn at about 50 official.
10:19.
10:19.
All right. That's it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much, everyone. Good night.
Copies for John